All right, it's Monday, October 2nd, 6 p.m., regular meeting of the Windsor Heights City Council. Roll call.
Susan Spears.
Here.
Joseph Jones. Michael Libby. Here. Lauren Campbell.
Here.
Teresa Harms.
My understanding is Ms. Harms had a personal emergency. She will not be joining us. Joseph should be popping on Zoom as we speak. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Susan Spears.
Yes.
Joseph Jones.
Yes.
Michael Libby. Yes. Lauren Campbell.
Yes.
Item 3, public forum. This is the time set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business other than those listed on the agenda. No action may be taken. Please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and keep your comments to no more than 5 minutes. Public comment? Hearing none. Item 4, consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Susan Spears.
Yes.
Joseph Jones.
Yes.
Michael Libby. Yes. Lauren Campbell.
Yes.
Could you turn up the overhead just a tiny little bit, just so we can hear? I can hear them, but. Item 5A, approve the first reading of ordinance number 2307. Motion?
Second.
Anyone speaking to this?
I think the only comments were there's been no public comments and there's no changes to the draft ordinance unless Trey had otherwise.
That's correct.
Okay. Roll call.
Susan Spears.
Yes.
Joseph Jones.
Yes.
Michael Libby. Yes. Lauren Campbell.
Yes.
Item 5B, consideration of Colby Park bid package and resolution number 2023-52, a resolution to provide for a notice of public hearing on the proposed plan specifications, form of contract, and estimated total costs for the 2023 Colby Park Improvement Project and for taking of bids on said project. That's a mouthful. I'm sorry. Okay.
Good to go, jump in.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, yep, so I think we have a PDF here we can share.
PDF for PowerPoint.
It was the PDF should be in the packet. Correct, yes.
Yeah, it's in the packet. It's the second attachment under B. Sorry.
It's a very large packet, so.
What's mine?
Yeah, right.
Got my workout, just carrying it in. Killed the tree right there. Killed more than one, I think.
I swear that same side, both side copy. The printer doesn't like me sometimes. Technology doesn't.
I get it.
There we are. Just want me to give you like a thumbs up, next slide sort of thing. Okay, yep, so we're here today. My name is Nate Weidel. I'm with Bolton Menk. I'm a landscape architect. I've been working on this project for, I think we're going on a couple of years ago, actually now, since we started master planning for the project. So what we're here today for is to run through a presentation of the final plans as they sit today at a 100% bid document level, and we'll be set to post drawings upon approval, post drawings tomorrow to the bid form or to the bid site. So I just wanted to give you a quick overview of where things are at. So next slide here. Reminder of the project team. So besides just me and my colleagues at Bolton and Menk, we've been working with the ad hoc parks project committee on this, and those individuals are listed on here. There's a mix of city council as well as resident input on that committee. And then, of course, Mayor Mike Jones and Adam Plague here, city administrator. So I'm taking just a step back here. This is the initial phasing diagram that we looked at back in January of 2023. Phase one, you can see was a mix of some parking and then also tennis court and pickleball courts. That went to bid back in February, and the bids did not come back favorably. So we went back with the Parks Committee and took a look at things, and actually then if we move to the next slide, changed priorities a little bit with help from the committee and looking at phase one, which was actually the playground and splash pad. And then how those tie into the rest of the site. So now we're looking at, for the purposes of this presentation, what you're seeing in green there as phase one. And that's what's set to go to bid this week. Project rendering here, showing these elements in just a little bit more detail. And we have some renderings following up after this as well. I'll jump to this so I can catch up here. Okay, so the splash pad, I wonder if I can point here, if that's gonna be, okay. So splash pad here, playground here, and each one of these elements is set up to be accessible. The playground equipment is all accessible by ramp up to multiple levels. And there are some play surfacing considerations to make sure that individuals in wheelchairs can move across the space. So it's a poured in place rubber surface. There are also some climbing structures that are like rubber mat material that individuals with some accessibility issues, they can climb up those rubber mats and get up to some of the higher levels of the play equipment. There's also some pedestrian connections throughout the park. We're looking at improving circulation from the amphitheater space over to the playground as well as the splash pad area. Plenty of opportunities for shade as well as seating areas. We're incorporating some new seating in the form of stone block benches, and we're also incorporating some reuse of benches and trash receptacles that are on site. So looking at reusing some furnishings that way. Next sheet here. So this is just kind of a rundown of some of the key elements that I just went through. Again, multiple seating types, increasing the amount of tree material on the site. So if you're looking at a kind of a ratio of trees that are being added to, as opposed to removed for the site, you're actually probably doubling on the amount of tree canopy in total. Again, looking at reusing site furnishings. Then the splash pad, I just wanted to touch on that briefly. The splash pad is set up to be a flow through system. So the splash pad during an operation, that system, all that water will run through to the sanitary sewer. And when that system is not in operation, there's a valve that closes and redirects storm water to the storm system. So it is a flow through system, no need to be dealing with chemicals to have storage on site for those kinds of things. So it should be pretty user friendly from that standpoint for city maintenance staff. Some project visualization here. The playground is set up in a really nice way that it's a really iconic facility that's going to invite people in from the parking lot, from the trail. People that are coming in here, we wanted to make sure, and this was a really big goal of the committee is to have this structure that people are going to remember, kids are going to want to come back to, and just a facility that people can really enjoy using here in town. I mentioned accessibility a little bit. This shows a little bit of that here in this rendering. You can see here this ramp here that runs up to the second level of the play structure there. And then there is the rubber mat that I was talking about that kids can crawl up that mat all the way up to the second level of that structure. And there are some other elements in here, multiple different types of play to really maximize that play factor. This starts to give you an idea of how the playground is integrated into the site. So we're incorporating landscaping into the playground to make it feel like this playground is really kind of reaching out into the surrounding park, not something that is just a circle just kind of plopped in the middle of your playground. So you can see some elements in here, some seating elements like I was talking about a little bit ago. We have a concrete leaf seat wall here, so parents can sit all the way along here and be observing their children as they're out here playing. We also have some stone block seats here, like I mentioned, around the outside here. So plenty of different opportunities for seating. And then just the overall theme of this, I guess back to that, I didn't touch on that very much. The theme of this project, we went through several themes, and the theme that the committee was really drawn to was this this theme of the leaf and of the floral environment, I guess. But really just touching on the Windsor Heights theme that you see all throughout town. Splash pad view. So again, pulling in that theme from the playground, wanting this project, this site to flow from one area of the park to the next. Opportunities for shade and seating, again, then multiple play opportunities with different types of jets and spray equipment. We do have one vertical element in the center of the splash pad there. I think that's an important element to make sure that we're getting some verticality to the structure and also some playfulness there as well. Color themes are all matched with the playground. It's one of the advantages of having the same manufacturer for both the playground and the splash pad, so we can color match and everything is really coordinated that way. Yep. And this one I'll have you pause on. So there's just a couple of things I wanted to point out on this one. You can see there's a kid here. And this rendering, this is a manufacturer rendering, but you can see this kid here. There's a couple of equipment here that kids can turn and spray at their friends. And then there's also then around the outside, just some arc jets. Kids can jump through. And then there's some vertical jets here as well. That's it from a design standpoint. We can definitely come back and answer any questions, but I'll jump through just a cost update on this. Base bid estimate, we have at $2,880,000. The bid alternates that I'll just describe here one by one. So a bid alternate are just items that provide some value added to the project, but they're not in the base bid. Meaning that if we get bids that come back favorably and the city wants to include any or all of these bid alternates, then they can do that based on level of priority or cost or both, depending on what the desires are there. So alternate A is in here as expanding the existing parking stalls on the east side of the site. So there's a handful, there's maybe 10 stalls over there on the east side that right now are undersized. And what we're including here as an alternate is to expand that size to the appropriate size. And then that would be open to public parking on that side. Alternate B is to add the 3 overhead structures around the splash pad. Alternate C is to upgrade the concrete seat wall to a cast stone. And by going to a cast stone, that's just a much denser concrete material and would stand up better to wear and tear. And then also would also provide a higher level of finish to the project. Alternate D would be to expand the irrigation system into the project area. So our base bid is simply to cap the irrigation system where it's at and to not extend into the project area. And then item E is to add a chain link fence at the interface of Public Works. So there's a chain link fence that exists currently on the east side of that parking lot. It would just be taking that fence and extending it to the east. Okay, so schedule, we talked about this just a minute ago. So notice to bidders is set up to go out tomorrow. Bid opening set for October 31st. And then the next 3 are a little bit contractor dependent, but the way that we're looking at things right now is that a pre-construction meeting could happen in November with the main portion of construction starting in April and then finishing up November of 2024. And during construction, just a couple of things we wanted to make sure we hit on. We understand that there are community events and the contractor would be expected to at least coordinate with the city on trying to work around these events. The one critical thing that they would need to know is specific dates. The community center could be used, will be used, available during construction, but the contractor is going to have to work on making sure that access is continued to be provided, accessible entries. So we have it set up so that accessible entries are phased in a way that there's always one accessible entry to the facility. Construction sequencing, then that's a little bit of what I was just going into actually. Making sure that the construction of the project happens in a way that it works for city events. And then construction safety, orange construction fencing all the way around the site. And then ultimately the contractor is responsible for any of that phasing that happens throughout the sequence or throughout the construction sequencing, making sure that the site is held in a safe manner. That gets me through the main portion of the presentation. This is some detailed stuff that I guess we have in the packet as well to take a look at, but I'm happy to take questions.
I have a few questions.
Yeah.
So just wondering, so how many gallons of water will we use at the splash pad daily or yearly if we run it May 1st through September 30th? And what will the cost be?
So I don't have an idea of the cost, but we did sit down with city maintenance staff to go through that. Did you save it? Okay. So the splash pad, it's going to really depend on your hours of operation, right? So you're typically going to probably see that in operation for 4 to 6 hours a day. And the number of gallons is escaping me right now, so I might have to come back to that. I'll get my notes out. But you know, depending on your hour of operations, that's going to tell you what your gallons per minute would be.
So,
And it's on demand, right? Where the kids hit the button
Actuator, yeah.
and then it times out and then they run back and hit the button. Okay.
right, so it can be set up in multiple ways. It can be set up hours, operation, and those can be changed, whether it's Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday is different or whatever. It can also be set up where, and it's probably depends upon how everybody wants to work. Different things could come on at different times, right? It might not be everything runs or, so it's very customizable to what you want. You can set it from 12 to 4 or 12 to 2 or 12 to 8 o'clock at night. I mean, it's kind of whatever we're looking at. Plus, as Laura mentioned, it's actuated, so it sets off. Once nobody hits it, it's shutting off. And then, and there, you can set it, I believe, is if some kid just keeps on pushing it, I don't think it just keeps on adding 10 minutes to a time or whatever it's set up, so.
So you really can't tell me how many gallons
It
is
kinda-
used. Because I mean, Googling, it looks like you could have anywhere from 5,000 to 26,000 gallons of water used on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's kind of how you set it up, whether you run it from 10 to 2 or 10 to 4 or, 4 hours a day, 6 hours a day. It kind of varies about kind of how it's set up, I guess.
So the quick math on it, it's 106 gallons per minute that it runs. And so if you're figuring on 4 hours of operation per day, 4 times 60 times 106 gallons per minute is 25,000 gallons per day.
I believe that was with all pieces
All
sprayed
of
up
them.
simultaneously.
Right,
from
yes.
Our last conversation.
And then if we have it running for like 153 days, I mean, that's running it May 1st through September 30th. Granted, not all days are going to be used, but that's a lot of water being used when we're trying to be an environmentally friendly city. That's very concerning to me. Plus, we're in a water where you hear about water usage. What happens when Des Moines Water says, hey, you guys are able to use your irrigation every other day? What happens to the splash pad? Have we thought about that? I mean, does that shut down then completely? Because now Des Moines' hours of operation are 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. So, I think 4 hours. Is that like continuously being used, or is that like from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. we have 6 kids that came through, so we have 4 hours of usage? Is that kind of what we're looking at, or are we looking at just having it open from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m.?
I don't think we're making that decision.
Right, that's up to you. That's up to,
I'm just trying to figure out, because then we add the money in for all the gallons of water on top of it yearly.
Right.
Which,
So the 20-some thousand gallons you're referring to, is that continuous then?
That's continuous,
Okay.
all of them running, that's.
Which
Yeah.
is
it
not,
can only come out, so much water can only come out per minute. That's
Okay.
a maximum
Yep.
that it can handle.
which is not how I think any splash pad in Des Moines operates. I think they are all on demand. You press the button.
Mhm.
Someone correct me if I'm wrong,
The ones
please.
that we've worked on for the city of Des Moines are
Right.
that way.
And I think they're, at least the ones I've been to on Tower Park there, you press it and it's 5-10 minutes or something, and you have to press it again. So your math there was based on it just running continuously.
for
Okay.
just 4 hours.
But also all features running simultaneously. I think what we would do is sequence each feature to go for 15, 20 seconds, and then the next one goes. Now, some of them, like the ones that you spray your friends with, that probably is running the whole time, but the ones that arc, I don't think we would run simultaneously for 10 minutes when the button's pushed would be my guess or my suggestion.
There is a lot of flexibility to it. The sequencing that's set up in the manufacturer's manifold, you could change it. You could have it one thing one day, and then the next thing, it could be something totally different. One example we talked about was if there is an event in the park and you wanted to have it run all of the equipment at once, you could have it do that one day, and then the very next day you could go back to having it sequence. So there's a lot of flexibility.
Usage aside, the question of we're using a lot more water, what does that do for our costs then as far as paying for the water? Where does that come from?
There's a meter there, so it just gets metered. So if you're using, say, 5,000 gallons a day or something, then it goes from 10,000, obviously your water bill goes up. 'Cause I guess I don't know the cost for the,
If my experience in Johnston was the city did not pay water bills, the costs were part of the wheeling costs, considered loss basically in the system. And that's distributed throughout the customer base in the city. And the splash pad in Johnston was about $20,000 if you did assign a cost to that a year operationally. But the city didn't actually pay that bill. Now as a full service customer of Des Moines Waterworks, that may work differently here. I'm not sure.
And then you talked about the sanitary sewers, it goes into the sanitary sewers, and I wasn't typing. My fingers weren't keeping up with what you were saying. I know it's a shock.
I just talked a little too
But-
fast then.
No, it wasn't your fault. It was me trying to comprehend and type. And so it flows through the sanitary sewer system if it's been used, correct? And then if it hasn't been used, it goes through to the
Storm sewer.
Yep.
storm.
There's a valve there that gets automatically switched when it gets used.
Oh, got it. So like if it's raining or whatever, it's
It
gonna go
goes to
through storm sewer.
Yes,
Gotcha. Okay.
yep.
Thank you.
And then we have the ability to handle that with what we have at the park
Yeah.
now. And then I was looking at some of the landscaping. That's a lot of landscaping. I mean, we couldn't keep the plants at the community event center alive in the planters. And we want 800, was it something? 897 perennial ground covers at a gallon. Where are we going to, who is going to take care of this?
So one thing I'll just talk to briefly on that is the existing plant material that's out there right now. The Keep Windsor Heights beautiful planting beds. They're very perennial heavy. And so if you're looking at the plan layout where it looks like we have a lot of that same material, we're introducing a lot of shrub material as well. That will be easier to weed just from the standpoint of knowing what's weed and what's not. So keeping that maintenance per square foot should be a much easier task. But as far as who maintains it, you know, I know that Keep Windsor Heights Beautiful maintains some of that down there now, but I think there's some question on which beds they're actually maintaining currently.
I mean, we pay for University Avenue stuff to be watered, if I remember correctly. So I'm a little concerned. We're adding water bills. We're adding, you know, all of these bills to an already almost $3 million project. And this is something that we're going to have to continuously pay for. Plus, you know, we want to be this environmentally friendly place. And I'm a little nervous about all of that.
Susan, if I could interject real quick. I know that Celeste that was on our committee with Keep Windsor Heights, I know that she was pleased to see the landscaping design and was in support of it. I don't know that they they didn't sign something that said like that they promised to take care of it in perpetuity, but her input was definitely vital in that part. And I remember those conversations.
But my concern is we're already looking for more volunteers for Keep Windsor
Yep.
Heights Beautiful, and we know how volunteers go.
Definitely.
So, you know, that's my concern. We're putting all this great stuff in. I don't want it to die in a year and then,
Well, they're perennials, right?
but you still have to water them. I mean, you can't just plop them in and say,
So I don't know how the watering is going on University Avenue, but the plant material that we specify is a drought tolerant species. I mean, with the projects that we work on, there's a lot that doesn't have any irrigation at all. And so our pretty much standard palette is just to go with these drought tolerant species. Now, that may mean that you have some plant material that when you start getting into the really hot days of August, like we had a few weeks ago, some of those plants are cold season plants. And so when they start hitting those really warm weeks, they look a little tired, but you won't have to worry about them just totally perishing. It's just that they'll just look a little tired and then perk up again when we get to.
once the roots take hold, I mean, they have to,
Yes.
they have to be established before we
Right.
can.
There's an
And so-
establishment period, yep. The way that we have the specs written though, is that the contractor is responsible for that first year of maintenance, which is considered that establishment period. So that's a standard SUDAS bid item with plant material, is that they are responsible for that first year establishment period.
I just keep going back to university, you know, I mean.
Which is still under contract, right? I mean, the big sign's still up there, so.
Yeah. The final pieces, yes.
Right. Few things. So that slide didn't specify, but Windsor Heights, the Windsor Heights Foundation has been part of this conversation as well. Either Mark Aarons or David Schwartz have been, I think, at every meeting that we have, that we've had. And then to clarify, we had talked about this, I think the way the memo was written and coming into this conversation was that this was for phase 2, which was the plaza, the splash pad, and the playground. But to clarify, phase 2 is now phase 1, right? Of which it is all of those things, but also this phase also incorporates the ADA accessible ramp on the rear of the community center, correct?
Right.
All right.
And then, so I was a little confused. How many structures will we have around the splash pad? Because it's on the bid alternates, it says there's 3 that we can add in. Will there be any? I'm not exactly sure. There's a lot to read through on this. And so I could have missed it.
The
And-
structures, the physical structures are bid alternates.
So there would be nothing unless we did the
The shade, you're talking about the
135,000.
shade.
Yes.
We're talking, so what you'd be having is the trees that line that berm on the south side of the splash pad. That's where your shade would be coming from in that case. Yes.
The alternate option is then for the permanent sort of sunshade, or and the renderings are kind of like, they look to be like a metallic. That is the 3 things that
Correct.
are the alternates.
So I don't think the rendering is actually the same instance, right? What we're spec.
It's
Does it
pretty
say metal?
close.
It's pretty close, but yeah, they're metal.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's just in there to add an alternate if we choose. I mean, if a year down the line, you find $130,000, they can be added after that, so.
The difference between the rendering and what's specified in the plan set, if you were to dig into that plan set, is that the 2 forward posts are not actually there. It's a cantilevered structure.
Yeah.
So it just opens things up a little bit as far as circulation goes.
But without this bid alternate, it would just be the trees
Yeah,
that,
maybe the trees, yep.
What other questions are there?
Nate, if I could, fall of 2022, we saw a lot of bids coming in very high above engineers' estimates. This estimate was put together recently. What have you been seeing bids come back for in 2023? Are they coming back down to reality, or are they continuing to escalate?
The pace hasn't been as extreme as what we saw, obviously that the 2022. But I mean, you're still seeing upward pressures on things. And so as we've been going through, we've been getting, as we get other bids that are coming in, that might affect a unit price here or there.
And I know we talked about this a little bit previously, but if we saw the bid come in high, is there any other fat to cut on this base bid estimate to try to keep us at or under that $3 million cost?
We're pretty well locked in on a lot of things. Where we might be able to start looking at some things is some of the concrete stains that we're showing that are pulling some of those leaf themes through the project. But as far as, the rest of the project, you're pretty much talking about physical things that are hard to just pull out.
There's always an opportunity, right?
Yeah,
It's
right.
just a matter of what that opportunity is, so.
Also, I see that like you have picked the, somewhere in here. I didn't mark them like I wanted to. You already picked out like who's the appropriate bidder for, or who's the appropriate company for the playground equipment and everything. Is there a reason that we picked just that one group? I mean, I see that they're local and in Minnesota as well.
Yeah,
But-
so, yeah, I can talk to that a little bit. So first of all, the play equipment and the splash pad equipment, by going with one manufacturer, we're able to use a lot of the same materials, color coordinate, have everything kind of work within the same theme. By doing that as well, you get a discount for using all of their equipment. So we have that reflected in the bid. And then a lot of the selection of the play equipment was assisted by the Parks Committee. So we went, pulled together some different options. I believe we even maybe presented a second option for the splash pad with a different manufacturer. And the committee seemed to be really pretty set on the equipment that was shared from this particular manufacturer. The other one just didn't rise to the same level.
And I think this one was, came in at a lower price point than the other vendor too, I think.
Yeah,
That's an important factor to consider.
I mean, that was part of the consideration, it's part of the conversation.
If you would have led with that, I would have been okay. I
So-
mean,
I think more from a design standpoint.
A few things. So there is no cheap park that incorporates a splash pad and a accessible playground. I actually reached out to Mayor Clark from Waukee because they did some work at a park called Fox Creek, not even talking about the $20 million park they bought or built, Triumph, which I believe just the stuff surrounding that whole was 5.6 million alone. But they have a place called Fox Creek, which I'm not familiar with. But part of the Fox Creek, they did a building, they did a parking lot, they did some courts, a splash pad, and a playground. That all came in at $3.2 million. When I deducted the building, as well as the courts, I don't know how I don't think I could quite, get into the parking lot, but you're around $2 million there. That was in 2018. So things have changed a bit since then. Is that fair as far as pricing goes? There have been some events since 2018. So there is no, I guess, cost efficient way to this is going to cost money, and money is not wine. It does not get better with age. It actually gets worse because we are talking about spending the ATE money here. We haven't had speed cameras in this city for how long?
3 years.
Okay. So this is something that was identified as priority per our park survey. And I think that this incorporates of the top 4 things. I believe this takes care of 3 of them. The remaining one, of course, is the special events, which we have a great committee who's really dedicating themselves to that, as well as there is a 3rd phase, which will also hopefully come to fruition at some point that will make our special events even better with an incorporation of a food truck plaza as well. So I recognize that this plan is expensive. There unfortunately is, I don't believe there is a way for it to be not expensive. It is a tremendous amenity that we're going to provide to our residents. And it's been, again, identified as a priority by our residents. That is my stump speech. Are there any other questions or comments for BMI?
I just wanted to add in with another comment. I know splash pad was one of the requests and we've already approved our park plan a few votes ago. I don't remember how long ago. But this last weekend, I went to a park that listed, it was a private park, but listed it as an accessible park. And their idea of an accessible park is a standalone swing that is accessible about 10 meters away from the rest of the play equipment. And so it's not inclusive in any way. And so it gave me even a deeper appreciation for the accessible design where it's baked in from the very beginning in our park, where it can be accessible to kids of all abilities. And so that was one thing I wanted to highlight there, that accessibility isn't an afterthought with this. And I'm also really excited that our CEC will finally become more accessible on the east side of the building there too. So that's all. Thank you.
And as a final note, we're actually not even, council, you're not being asked to vote on spending any money. It simply is it's going out to bid. You've already rejected one bid for phase A. If it does not come back to your liking, then you can reject it at that point as well. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, is there a motion for 5B?
Second?
Roll call.
Susan Skiris.
No.
Michael Libby.
Yes.
Lauren Campbell.
Yes.
Joseph?
Yeah, did someone say something?
We said a lot.
Yes, I caught that part, but I knew that we were voting, but I didn't hear my name. Sorry. Yes.
Sorry, Joseph.
Oh, I can hear you.
Are you an I or an A?
I'm an I.
5C, presentation from ISG and discuss winter 2023 salt shed options.
The presentation to share, so I think you guys are able to pull that up, correct? Okay. As that is getting pulled up, I'll just introduce myself and my teammates here. Erica Schaefer, an architect with ISG. ISG is an architecture, engineering, planning, and environmental firm in Des Moines. Brad?
Brad Pinar, I'm a structural engineer with ISG.
And Tanya Pierce, I'm the Government and Cultural Business Unit Lead for ISG.
Sorry, slow and slow.
Okay.
Drum roll.
As we continue to pull that up, we were engaged just to do a structural assessment of the salt storage shed and the maintenance building down by the project that we were just looking at. If you want to scroll ahead to the third page there, right there. So tonight we really just want to talk to you all about three things. The first two are what we saw at the salt storage building and the public works. And then third, we just want to introduce the idea of what is space use analysis, what is a building facilities assessment, and then is that anything that you guys would like to engage in? We're just here to do a little bit of education on what that process would look like. So Brad's going to take it away with the analysis.
Okay, so I was going to start with discussing the salt storage shed that we were asked to take a look at. Beforehand, we were given a report that was done in 2018 that discussed the condition of the salt storage shed back then. And then we visited the site, and back then in 2017, they said that the salt storage building should be demolished and replaced. And that's what my recommendations are as well. And it's only gotten that much worse over 5 years. I'm saying repairs are not feasible. It's beyond its useful service life. It's a danger. It's ready to get torn down. I do also mention that if you do want to use it for one more winter, and I'm saying just one more winter, and there's no way it can be used after that, you're going to have to take some precautions. The public works employees, that when they unload and load this salt storage shed, I'm saying that's when you're at the most risk of having any issues and some jostling of the walls. And I'm concerned of the cracks in the masonry walls. I'm concerned about the corrosion at the roof beams. I'm concerned about the connections of the roof beams to the wall. It's not in a good shape, and it's lived a good life and it's ready to be demolished. And then we also took a look at the maintenance building, and the 2007 report basically said it needs some improvements, but is economically salvageable. And that's my recommendations as well. And again, it's gotten worse over 5 years. There has been some repairs that were made, but there's just, everything's getting worse. And for example, you have a lot of corrosion at the base of your columns, and I do a lot of assessments of DOT garages across the state. And I can tell you that if you don't maintain this corrosion at the bottom, the base of the columns, it's just going to get worse. Right now, you could just go in there, you can scrape off the corrosion and repaint it, and then you get a lot more service life. But if you wait a long time and you start to get lots of section loss of those columns, it becomes a much bigger deal, much more expensive to repair. So, and another item is just some of the water infiltration to the exterior walls. If you don't do anything about it, you just get a lot of moisture infiltration in the wintertime. It freezes and then expands and busts out the masonry. So it's time to do something to extend the service life of that building.
So we just wanted to pause right here and ask if there's any questions on item 1 or 2 of the salt storage or maintenance building.
Yeah.
So are you saying that we failed to kind of do maintenance ourselves in the process of this, or was it so far gone for so long that we just kind of, it's kind of like you have so many projects that you just pull the covers over your head and just
Right.
don't deal with it. Is that kind of what we're doing, what we've done for the last 5 to 10 years? Or did we just fail to because we really
Well,
haven't had maintenance plans?
Sure. For the salt storage building, I can say, it was recommended that you demolish it 5 years ago, and it has not been demolished, right? So that's the only thing I can speak to. I think there has been some repairs to the maintenance building, but I'm not too sure. I wasn't involved in the report 5 years ago and what's been done since then.
This is another example of austerity budgeting, I think.
Possibly.
One of the concerns that I would have is that you deemed this structure, the salt shed, inappropriate to use 5 years ago. So I would suspect that would open up the city of Windsor Heights to some litigation should something disastrous happen there. Would that be accurate?
Potentially. And I'll say that I was not involved in the report 5 years ago, but yeah. Potentially. And that's why I'm saying, yeah, if you are going to use the salt storage shed for this winter, you need to take some additional precautions.
Sure.
Just to help protect the city.
And we do have Public Works here to kind of talk through some options on the salt shed. However, don't want to keep our friends here all night as we work through that. So maybe first you could talk us through kind of the larger space use analysis, and then we could jump back to Andy and Jason on that.
Yeah, we can go ahead to the next slide then. So we're going to use the word space use analysis, and just a real quick overview. That would mean what space use analysis and facility assessment. So if we go to the next slide, just kind of wanted to give your team a quick overview of what that process would look like. First, it's listening. We do interviews with all the different departments, kind of what we call user group meetings, of understanding the different departments, how they work, their needs today, their needs tomorrow. Just a lot of listening and interviewing. Let me go ahead and look at your facilities, similar to a report we did here, but a little bit more in depth, and we could discuss about the exact depth and breadth that you would want to engage in. And then we would sit down with a team that you guys or at somewhere the city would select. We'd sit down with that team and start to prioritize those needs. And then that would be a good point for a pause point, or move forward right into what I'm calling the plan, where we can actually put pen to paper and start to sketch out some conceptual ideas about what would it look like to sort of repair in place the different facilities that we've assessed, or what would it look like to sort of make a new campus, kind of different levels of investment there.
I would just add on that look phase with the evaluate phase, we take a look at Brad as a structural engineer, so certainly structural is involved, but also mechanical, electrical, plumbing. Those are your core functions within any building that they have some critical nature to them. I've learned a lot working with structural engineers. Look up, it's all about load bearing and what's above your head, right? We don't want to have to walk into a building and worry about these kinds of things. And then mechanical, electrical, plumbing, nobody wants to spend money on it, but gosh, it sure is important. And it really does keep all of the elements in this environment where they need to be. My role with ISG worked with a number of cities and counties throughout, frankly, the upper Midwest. And what this sort of a plan provides for you as a city is an opportunity to take a holistic look at what do we have, what are we missing, where are we tight on space, where do we maybe have some extra space, and how do we move these pieces around, and what do we need to do with the pieces we have to really propel as a city to either keep our staff in a good spot, maybe allow our staff to work better, support the community in a better way. There's many communities will get brought in to do this, and when Erica says it gives you a pause point, they can then stop and go, okay, hold on. Why have we been doing this way? Like the same question, like, wait, what? When were these decisions made? And so you can then kind of really just be more diligent and mindful about what you're doing with your spaces and how they continue to serve your community. So that's sort of the overview of how we work through it. The prioritizing and the plan really we can kind of take that in a number of steps, as few or as many steps as you'd like, but we would move in the pace at which the city would like to have you move.
Thanks, Tanya. And I guess I'd just add, in my short time here, this is something that I was interested in having a conversation about, because walking through the Public Works building, you can see the deterioration of the salt shed and some issues with the Public Works building. But, since the 2018 study, we've outsourced the sanitary sewer maintenance component of that. So I think the space use analysis of that 2018 study that suggested some additional space requirements in both office and cold storage, I don't know if those are still applicable based off of kind of the staffing changes and the departmental changes needs since then. If you look at our public safety building here, there's been an evolution of its use over time. I think, we have more commonly see female police officers and female firefighters. We don't necessarily have appropriate spaces to accommodate them in an ideal situation. The overnight area for the firefighters and their day spaces is rather cramped. Could this building be remodeled and reused to serve the needs a little bit better, potentially? City Hall, we've got a receptionist area that's about 1/4 of the office space. We don't have a receptionist. In the CEC building, we have an office space. We don't house anybody in that office space anymore. Would that be better repurposed into a nursing station or storage or something? I just see that there's been some areas of disinvestment or lack of investment, maybe because of unknowns and long-term staffing or space use needs, and kind of a holistic look at all 4 of our facilities may give us the opportunity to think about whether we want to be in or out of the floodplain in some areas, consolidate into a corporate campus, remodel. But think about that holistically before we start spending significant money into any of our buildings, with the possible exception of a salt shed, which I think we need to probably address sooner rather than later. So.
That's all that we had. So open up for any questions you have for our team. Or Adam, I don't know if you wanted to include the salt shed now. It's up to you guys.
You gotta say salt shed 4 times fast. I think at the most basic level, can we just establish that the salt shed is dangerous? Like, it is dangerous.
Yes, but I mean, it's not used, it's not used for public inhabitation or
Sure.
anything like that, but yeah, it's an unsafe condition, yes.
Okay. All right, so I guess the next step is, if that is the case, then what?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So thinking about the access to that building, while it's not a public space, it's not specifically blocked off from public access.
Sure.
Should we do we need to have like caution tape over it and cones to keep people, I mean,
I would say that, yeah, when you're loading and unloading, that's when you're risking you're at your highest risk, right? When you're potentially can hit the walls with an unloader and that sort of thing. So I would say, when are loading and unloading that salt storage shed, yes, you should be making sure that there's an extra person around, to make sure that there's nobody around and there's not anybody within the salt storage area.
but the risk isn't so imminent that it needs to be like caution taped off. And like I did stack some corn stalks against it. I think 2 bushels that Michael generously provided. I did not further harm the structural.
Yes.
Okay, good.
anything move.
Right. And again, I'm just looking at one snapshot in time, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if things can get moved around, that could change in an instant if, you have a large wind event or, it does get hit by a vehicle or whatever. So,
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, outside of the salt shed, I really do support a facilities review. So as AJ has just mentioned, we can look at utilization and prior planning, the way any sane business entity would do that, to see what works, what doesn't work, what may need to happen in order to create a safe environment for our community, but also a structured and centrally located facility for our community. So yeah, I'd be all in on that.
So with the salt shed being problematic, what are the options then?
Thank you, Erica, Tanya, and Brett.
Yep.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Council members, just first like to introduce myself. My name is Andy Larson. I'm Public Works Supervisor, relatively new working with the city here. So thank you. Obviously, we all kind of understand the state that the salt shed is in. From an operations standpoint, from the Public Works Department, when we get into the winter event season, it's essential for us to have all our commodities basically at the ready and accessible, ready to go and ready to use. So if we were allowed to continue to use that building, what we would do as a Public Works Department would be basically limiting the tonnage of salt that's stored in that building. Right now, the way it's loaded and unloaded, with the unloader kind of climbing up into the building, that would stop right now. So basically what we would do is limit the tonnage and limit the operators using equipment inside that building. Basically what we would do is drive in straight, scoop, drive out, or back out straight, limiting having to move, twist and turn inside that building. We have our fuel station, our salt commodity storage, and our calcium tanks all right there. So when we're in the midst of a snowstorm, it's essential for us to fuel, load salt, load calcium, and get back out into the community to provide that service of cleaning and maintaining the streets. A couple other options that we've kind of explored is to obviously rebuild the shed, different style, excuse me, basically bunker blocks with a steel truss and fabric, kind of a hoop and fabric system. And we've been in the process of talking to a couple different companies, trying to put estimates and bids together on approximately what it would cost to get a building, have the current salt shed demolished, and then erect that one in that same footprint. Another option would be is to rent vacant Sears building someplace here in town. There might be some modifications needed to be done in a different space to allow us to get the equipment in there and load and unload the salt out of there. another option would be is to work with a partnering community, let's say Urbandale, for example, where we could store our commodity, excuse me, at their location and then have to load and unload out of there. But the downside of moving it away from the central location of the public works facilities is the time and effort in the midst of the storm, being away and not being out on the road, maintaining our own city. So if we have to travel to Urbandale, we're at their mercy, getting in their yard, their equipment, and getting back into town. So it's kind of breaking up the whole process, and it would slow things down. So from a public works standpoint, if we could continue to use this building for one more season, with those limitations set on tonnage stored and personnel in that building using the equipment, that's how we would like to proceed.
I'll just say, 3 weeks ago, I would have probably pushed pretty hard to try to get this thing demolished and rebuilt. But we're at the 11th hour. I feel like Public Works has been very diligent in coming up with a plan to try to operate safely. I don't like it. I wish we didn't have to. Yeah, at this point, I think they've got me convinced they can use it safely. If something were to happen there and it becomes more dangerous, we can shift to Plan B. Urbandale's indicated they would allow us into their facility if needed. But I'm not sure trying to jump into the Sears building or trying to get something constructed here before snow flies is the best option. But if that's what council wants, I think we can pursue it. And before the new year, we may have a new salt shed up. But with the supply chain issues we've seen over the last few years and quick decisions that would have to be made, I'm not sure it would be the most cost efficient new salt shed, particularly if lingering questions of doing this in the floodplain. Do we want to raise the grade further? And other potential additions, expansions, repairs to the rest of the public works building. All that kind of leads me to think that if we can stretch this out into spring of next year, maybe that's the best option.
And to their point, sharing with the Urbandale facility, we would actually take our end loader to their facility, leave our end loader there at their facility during the winter time, basically to load our trucks. Once again, that's very difficult. You got to have weight, you got to have that salt weight in the back of our dump trucks because those are not 4-wheel drive. So, you've got to really watch how much when you're getting close to empty. Yeah, I get that it's, 1.2 miles from Windsor Heights to Urbandale, but then we only have 2 big dump trucks. And to the point of a big snowstorm, that takes that other truck out there. And we all know that we have hills in this town and it can get slick real quick. And it's no disrespect to anybody in this room, but we're going to be the ones getting the phone calls, not you guys. And, we want to be able to make sure that, we maintain.
Let me just stop you right there.
No.
This is a small town. Do not forget that.
Everybody knows how to get a hold of us.
I know.
A question.
But those are the things though, you understand what I'm saying, that
Yes.
phone will ring off the hook.
Right.
And
What-
we don't want that issue.
One of the questions I have is, at the current salt shed, we have product in there
Yes.
at the present time.
Yes.
And you indicated that the end loader goes up. Because we already have a hill of salt on both sides, how do we rectify that? We don't go up and we just go under and out?
Yeah.
Would that be
you just-
accurate?
yes,
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
you just load out and then kind of let the pile
Yep.
come back to you instead of, there's no taking any chances going up, because if you shift,
Perfect.
right.
Right.
I
right.
thought so.
No,
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So, instead of that salt shed will hold about 400 ton. So if we keep about 200 ton, basically right now on the one side is completely empty. The other side's got about 140 ton in it right now. So if we keep our tonnage down, we can call our supplier at any time. And as we get closer down to drift, they will haul it in. So, we've already, been through that process with our salt company and told them the issues that we have, and they're willing to work with us on all aspects of it, so.
When you talk about the DOT, when I think about the salt shed and you're talking about this design that you with the, for lack of a better term, the hoop and screen.
Right.
Is that what the DOT uses? Like you will see, sometimes it's, I think maybe galvanized or whatever, I don't know, but it's
Yeah.
kind of like that hoop thing and it's out there.
Yeah, there's
DOT.
we talked to a lot of other communities, other shops out there. A lot of people, there's a couple different foundation plans that you can use with that hoop and tarp system, whether it's a poured in place or poured in place concrete wall, just like a house foundation would be, or those bunker style blocks, which you just basically kind of Legos stacked on top of each other, and you can kind of customize your height based the building footprint plus the height, you can calculate your tonnage. So if we have 400 to 500 tons of salt, that would get us through the average winter. So there's a lot of variations within that building. The people that we've talked to that have kind of made the switch to that style of building love it. And we have salt stored out in the Grimes facility, and that's the system that they have. A lot of that commodity storage, whether it be, industrial or even into agriculture commodities, a lot of people are kind of using that system. You have the height, you can, if you don't have the footprint, you can go up with it.
Looking at what we have, I think probably the best thing is to really put the Band-Aid on this and hope, whatever, that it gets us through the winter. I'll even cross my fingers and hope we don't have much snow, because I don't like snow, but, and then I really, if we're looking at this, I would like to make sure that we take into consideration the flood mitigation and the flood plain as we design and look at what we're going to do, so that we're not, okay, well, this is great. And then, oh, wait, now we're dealing with, well, we should have done it this way, which is kind of things that have happened here in the past where.
And one thing that I would like to touch on too, that you I think had brought up with the folks from ISG, that salt is a very highly corrosive material.
Right.
So, lack of maintenance plays obviously a role, but that material, same thing with the end loader and all the equipment that we have down there, it's used in an environment that is very harsh and very hard on that equipment. We live in Iowa, you can see how many cars, vehicles have rust. That salt just eats metal away. They don't go together. So it's that problem is coupled, across multiple things.
I also, we didn't have a downspout put back on after how many years. So, maintenance like that, that's what made me question
Right,
more
right.
things,
Holes in the roof.
all of these things that we maybe put a Band-Aid on, or maybe we just turn the other way. I don't know. That's been my concern on a lot of this stuff. So hopefully, once we figure out what we're going to do, we can come up with a maintenance plan as well, as far as how do we make sure that these buildings are taken care of properly as they should. Every year, the rust paint, I don't know, whatever that whole thing was, make sure that we do that and have that system in place.
Yeah, and we'll follow the recommendations that ISG had done for the maintenance building too, with the columns scraping off the rust, getting it cleaned up, and painting it, which basically kind of sealing it to try and preserve those columns, for an extended period of time versus just letting them go and not doing anything.
Is there any equipment that could be rented to help keep this building as safe as possible for this winter? I'm thinking like an auger or something that could pull the material out versus you guys having to drive in and creating that opportunity for impacts. And it's okay if that's a follow-up thing. I would rather us spend the money and know that we've got people in there as the least amount of time possible to keep everybody safe.
Well, We can look into that and follow up with you
Okay.
about that. Yeah, some type of auger style or something that I can look into
Awesome.
that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it even said in there, you know, if we do maintain this shed, you know, there's only gonna be 2 to 3 people minimum running that end loader in there, and it's gonna be qualified operators, you know, and there's just not gonna be, you know, one of our inexperienced people in the end loader going in and out.
So one of the things you've done on option 2 here is come up with some cost estimates
Right.
as we go through this. If this is what we're going to do, would it be wise to start gather? I mean, I see that you've already gathered some bids, but asbestos abatement can be very expensive. And you know, if we say, okay, we're going to April 1, we're going to go forward to this. Does that make a difference when we're asking for bids and we're telling these folks, hey, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start the project April 1, bid accordingly?
The conversations that I've had in talking with these different companies has been just not really set a date per se. More or less just kind of, this is the status of the building that we have now. Come take a look at it and let us know what you think and kind of give us an estimated price. You know, there's a couple of the bids that have come back, you know, have set dates that, you know, it's good for 30 days or 60 days. But trying to kind of compile that stuff just to get an idea of the kind of a basic cost of what it would take to put that building up.
We have done an asbestos test on the building already. It came back minimal. So I wouldn't.
Yeah.
expect-
Which
Yeah.
is the caulking, the seal caulking.
Yeah, there's some
on there.
caulking around the windows, door frames, and then the roof sealing. So,
That's a shock.
That's the first thing that they'll have to take care of right
Yeah,
there. I mean,
right.
that's the very first thing, so.
and I do have an asbestos abatement contractor coming out this week. Fortunately, they couldn't get here prior to tonight's meeting. So I've contacted a couple of them. So they should be coming back with some estimates on the abatement.
Well, that's good to know because my only experience with asbestos has been a 200-yard tunnel that was heating and cooling and stuff
Yes,
that was full of asbestos
yes.
and sprayed on the ceiling. And so
Yeah.
it's good to know.
So assuming that the council does adopt your recommendation, what is the plan for then replacing it?
ASAP. I mean, next spring, as soon as it would allow, this winter, try and nail down firm estimates and I don't know what the contract process would look like, but as soon as the availability, start scheduling contractors to come in, I would like to see it at spring of next year demolished and then up and ready to go by summer.
And there are road use dollars available to do that yet this fiscal year, according to our finance director. So
There are or are not?
there are.
Okay, any other questions or discussion? Thank you both. Oh, don't go anywhere. Don't. We're talking about the end loader now. I think you better come on back up here.
Take a pause first.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Yeah. All right. All right. Get on back down there then.
Mayor, if I could just real quickly, I heard
No, you're
Councilmember
fine.
Libby express some support for the space use analysis. I don't know if other council members thought that was a good direction, bad direction, but welcome any other thoughts on that end.
Definitely. I am in support of that, especially as Councilwoman Skiri said, the taking into account our flood plan and what we're building and being designing any investments that we make with some intentionality around the long-term goals and not just putting up another building where there was a building before, because that's where we had it before, you know?
Susan, anything from you? Joseph?
It could be worth knowing. Sure.
Okay. All right, I skipped one. 5D, discuss additional updates to ordinance number 2306, an ordinance amending chapters 165 through 177 of the Code of Ordinances for the City of Windsor Heights related to zoning.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. We do have a presentation, I think, that we're bringing up. While we're getting that up, these items that we're going to discuss today came about as a result of our last meeting and the council looking for some additional information. Some of the things we're going to be asking you today is to provide us with some direction on how you want to go. The next slide, these are the items. So we're going to talk about architectural materials, ADUs, electrical vehicle charging stations, non-conforming structures, a UC district, parkland dedication, parking signage, and also provide you with an example of application of the new proposed ordinance. So Trey and I are going to do this together. I'll kind of take the first half and then he will pick it up. So the first question is about architectural materials. So I guess, you know, you can ask, why do cities generally adopt these kinds of standards? And they really are aesthetics. Really what the city is looking at is trying to meet minimum architectural or minimum design criteria. They often preserve or improve the character of the residential neighborhoods, downtowns, commercial and industrial districts. All of this combined helps to maintain and improve your tax base and also can reduce the impacts of dissimilar land uses. The current language on the next slide is what we have currently proposed. This language is relatively simple and applies specifically to the UC district. All other districts are required to, any construction or new construction is required to complement the existing buildings in the area. In the UC University District, the primary, what we have focused on is brick, which was one of the things the council first talked about. And so the specific regulation is that any building, new building in the UC district, the primary street facing facade needs to be at least 50% brick, and we take out windows and doors when we do that calculation. Some potential alternatives are in the next slide. So we looked at a number of ordinances. And some communities identify very specific classes of materials like class A, B, C. Sometimes you'll see them class 1, 2, 3, with A or 1 being the highest quality like brick, natural stone, glass, so forth. With B, maybe a little bit of a lesser quality. In this example, we use wood, textured concrete, and so on. And then class C are things like vinyl siding, and so on. I should add that what goes into each category is really a community standard. So for an example I can use is in some communities, EFS, and I couldn't even tell you what that stands for right now. I used to know years ago, but it's kind of that stucco veneer. That is sometimes considered a class 1, other communities are class A, while other communities would consider that a class B or lower class material. Another way to do it, rather than to get into the very specific classes like this, is to just basically identify permitted materials versus prohibited materials. And usually permitted materials are going to be in your class A, B, C, while prohibited materials might be pole barn buildings type things. Communities, if you do apply these, you usually have a specific percentage of the building facade requirement. Most ordinances I saw use within the 25 to 50% range of the higher class materials, while some ordinances apply it only to the front street facing. Others apply it to all sides of the building. Many ordinances also list a maximum percentage of the lower class material. So for example, if you say you have to have 50% brick or class A, but you can only have 25% of class B, and I'm just throwing out those numbers for examples. Standards can also vary from district to district and even sometimes uses within a specific district. For example, they may only apply to large scale residential or commercial buildings or industrial buildings. So the question we have for you tonight is, how would you like to proceed? What direction do you want to go? We can proceed with the language as written or some minor modification. I think if you want to get into more specific alternatives, then what we would need is some idea of what you're looking for. And then we would draft some language that would ultimately have to go back to the planning commission and then back to the council for a hearing. And I'm going to pause here to let you respond.
Thank you for laying out these options for us to consider. When I look at like Apple Valley, it's very glass heavy. And so if it was 50% brick, that would still not be very much in the way of brick of the non-glass facade. And so I would like us to consider a higher percentage in requiring brick just to keep it clean and simple. I think when there's things that are like up to the zoning administrator to get to determine what is, when I was on planning and zoning, there was a lack of, there's basically one person had all of the knowledge of the history of things. And so when you have someone, and luckily they did point out the come and go brick project way back when considering another project. And so when we leave things too open to interpretation or up to the discretion of others, I feel like it really creates a risk of unfairness. And so I'd like us to consider a higher percentage and just say brick for the is it the UC district? Is that right? The UC district.
Do you have an idea?
I mean, I'd say 100% of the facade that's non-brick and glass. I mean, I just pulled up the Google Street View of Apple Valley and, that's almost all glass, right? And so that wouldn't be a ton of bricks added. It's not, I don't think we would, given the spaces that could be redeveloped, I don't think we're going to risk like a giant wall of bricks, right? Thinking of those spaces. But I'm open to the opinions of others. But I would suggest 100% of the non-glass of the university-facing facade being brick.
What about the other parts of the building?
I'm open to it. I mean, I think the look of all brick would be great, but also understand that there's some cost difference. I had learned about the bricks that are made here in Iowa and how close they are. So thinking about from a ecological standpoint, brick can be recrushed and recreated into new bricks again and again, so they don't go to landfill. So I really like the idea of brick on the non-university facing streets, but would love to hear the opinions of others too.
I would concur.
I would look at it as, like, I completely agree. But then I think, how much money would that cost somebody? Is there a way that on the opposite sides that are not, especially like the backside, could we make it so that they have to have like a third of it be brick and then the rest could be whatever it, I mean.
Is brick terribly more expensive as a building material than any?
I guess the question for you is, do you want us, I mean, we could change, if it's as simple as saying, we want 100%, go back to the slide prior to this. In the district where it says a minimum of 50% brick, we could say 100% brick, less doors and windows. That's easy. If you want us to get more nuanced, then we need to kind of go back to and draft some language for you.
From what I get that I was at a brick-centric education event, but what they had said is in the cost difference in brick facade was minimal. And then when you take into account the lifespan compared to other commercial building products, like exterior cladding, that it was more cost effective when you're looking at a longer term.
Sure, and maintenance.
But
ongoing.
I'm wondering if if AJ has some experience from previous.
I would caution against 100% even on any side, just because you're going to have trim materials. So probably, 90% is probably as high as you'd want to go. Then you get into what is a brick definition, because there are now tilt-up concrete buildings that very much look like it's brick, and in fact, other than the seam, you can't really tell. Look pretty nice generally. They're done well. And then you've got the thin brick veneers, which once you get off of the ground level are typically fine, but if they're at the ground level, people kick them and they break, and those can be problematic. So yeah, I think there's probably some cost and aesthetic concerns that you'd get from the development community back on that, particularly on all four sides at 100%. And then I just also remind you, I guess, that the Windsor's out there as well. They have not submitted a site plan, but they have shown us renderings that include, I think, 0 brick, if I'm looking at the rendering right. So your decision here would impact potentially their project as well, because that is proposed to be part of the UC district, although I think we're going to talk about that to a degree as well. So
That was going to be my question, was what would this do to the Windsor project? And then going to that slide there. Number 1, I guess for me, complement currently existing buildings and structures within the district. I realize that Sherwood Forest is not in the UC district, but I'm going to use it as an example. What would complement that building? I mean, are we doing the Swiss chalet for everybody, or, that is my concern with that wording there. I don't like that at all. Just because, again, your
What is the
view of
standard set?
complement is different than my view of complement, and how are we going to really get that to what does complement mean? Does it mean that we all have the same brown color, or does it mean that we have, what does that mean?
And you're correct. This can be open to interpretation.
Thinking about, if we could go back and talk about larger projects like the Windsor, are there ways that we should consider with the code that, because the things that first came to mind for me were like Apple Valley, right? And other smaller places. And so I'm wondering if there's communities that, based on the size of the building, the percentage required would change, that, a larger building, like, let's say Sherwood Forest redevelops and they want to do a new facade, that size would only be 30 to 50% brick requirement based on the size.
Yeah, you can, really, it's a community standard. There's not any right or wrong answer in this. It's what do you want? How nuanced do you want to be? Yeah, so you can go down to that level of detail if that's what you want. I do also want to tell you, and I should have mentioned this right away, adopting a zoning ordinance doesn't mean you adopt it, put it on the shelf and walk away. It's especially when you do a new ordinance, you're always going to find things that you wrote and you thought were great and made perfect sense. And then you go to apply them and you think, well, that's not what we meant or wanted. So you will be updating it. So if you want to think more about this, it's certainly something we can go back and come back and, that kind of delays your process, but it's perfectly fine to do that. But you can also adopt and start thinking about it right away. So I don't want you to be limited to thinking I have to make all these decisions tonight or 2 weeks from now or whenever.
What are the recommendations that you have, AJ?
In terms of architectural materials?
No,
Again.
Adam. AJ. I was asking him for his
I also go by
recommendation.
AJ because there's 2 Adams.
okay.
It's a little confusing.
Another agent.
I guess the reason I wanted to bring this back in front of you was less on University Avenue, although I don't have any real concerns about increasing from 50% to 70, 75% or something like that, particularly on the frontage side of University or any primary road. But I think the point was brought up earlier on Hickman in particular, we've got some buildings that are in tired shape. And so if our standard is going to be something that's similar to those buildings, that would give me some concern. And I don't have a strong opinion on which one of these we'd have to go through. I'd probably defer to Bolton's recommendation, but I think we want to see high quality, durable materials used on our commercial corridors, and how we implement that, whether it's brick heavy or anything else that is a durable material that's going to last more than 30, 40 years without substantial maintenance, is fine by me. That's just what I think we should try to accomplish, is ensuring you're not putting vinyl siding or a wood product that has to get painted every 4 or 5 years on Hickman Road or 73rd or 63rd or University Avenue.
So because this says within the district, I want to make sure that it's not just the university corridor. I would like to make sure, like you said, it encompasses all of Windsor Heights with our ideas versus just the district, which I don't know what
Right
that
now you have a
means.
brick requirement proposed for University. I don't know that we need a brick requirement on Hickman or the other commercial corridors, but maybe something that requires a higher durability standard than what we have right now, which that language is fuzzy, I think, as we've talked about. So
what is the higher durability standard then?
I think there's lots of ways you can splice it. You can go to a Class A and list durable materials that have a manufacturer's warranty for a certain period of time, or you can just specify the materials that you want to see: brick, stone.
And that would be citywide,
Commercial.
commercial citywide.
So
Okay.
that would be our commercial districts.
Should be no fewer than 50% of Class A materials. Okay. So, then Lauren, your recommendation 75? Well, it's actually 100, but has he talked to you off of that cliff?
How does the idea of basing it on the size of a project, the size of the project, determining the percentage, how does that sit with anyone else?
My suggestion might be look at first story versus upper stories, because your eyes are visually going to be drawn, particularly as a pedestrian, to that first story. And if you want to have a brick kind of pedestrian feel to the corridor, focus on that. And then you get to the second or third stories, let them use a high quality permanent material, but one that they may think is most appropriate or cost efficient.
I like that, and that would also be consistent with the existing newer construction project that's on University. So I would be open to that. 100% of the first floor, ground floor, non-glass and door, have that be brick, and then the second floor and above could be Class A materials.
Did you say 100%, or did you think that we should do like 85 or 90% so that there could be other material like the trim and whatever else you stated? Or does that not matter?
Backboard of a sign, you probably don't need to have that be brick. What comes around the windows to insulate it and attach it to
Yeah.
the brick? That's why I say 90%.
Okay.
Highest. But I defer to our code experts. 100% scares me.
I'm okay with 90%.
Is that just the facade, or is that the entire first floor?
That is when you say facade, are you talking about just the street facing? I would say just the primary street facing. So facing University primarily, or if it's along 73rd and University or 63rd and University on those two street facing as well.
What about the remainder of the building?
I think the Class A is the durable materials that,
I'm not just talking street facing, I'm talking the other three corners.
sure, yeah. So thinking like the backside, I would say a durable material, so that way in 4 years, it's not already looking raggedy, needing to be repainted, or whatever the example that.
Maybe Class B.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, the metal wall panel systems, I've seen some really neat looking buildings that use the metal wall panel systems. So I don't know if it looks like that's a Class B material. Unless that's an architectural grade precast panel that I've seen and didn't know.
There's a lot of materials like the metal wall panels that look, they're more modern looking. I think what you want to stay away from are the corrugated, metal wall panel, but I don't know, I can't think of one, but you can, there tend to be a more modern looking building when you have the metal wall panels, but they can also be very nice.
You probably want to insulate it and you don't want the fasteners exposed. Is when it comes to metal paneling is what I've seen is the difference between high quality and lower quality.
Gotcha.
Just to review, where are we standing with this now? Like, as far as, because I looked down and then I was reading the Class A, Class B, and you guys kept talking. So I want to make sure that I know what we've kind of decided.
I think you're giving us some ideas of language. We are going to go back. I mean, obviously, if you want the differentiations between the Class A, B, and C, we need to add those in. We need to,
The numbers.
yeah,
Like if you're
they've
asking
given,
about the
so
numbers.
it sounds to me like we need to rework the language to be a little bit more nuanced. And if I'm understanding you correctly, you want these standards to apply really in commercial and industrial districts, not just the university corridor.
Correct.
So we need to rework that language also. So we can do that. I mean, you're giving us good feedback, so we know where to start, which is very helpful. And then we'll draft some language for you and have you review that.
Which was, hold on, which was first floor,
90%.
90% brick. Anything higher than that?
Yep.
It's all Class A?
Yep.
Right? And then the remaining, what did we land
Did
at?
we decide all 4 walls? Okay, so
Street facing was at 90% and you didn't. put a
Primary
number
street
to the-
facing, I think it was.
You
Yeah.
didn't put a number to the rest of
Okay.
the.
Just Joseph was having a little trouble. hearing you.
So what I heard is
Again, ask you, Adam, seeing as how
I'm
We
going to
defer
I'm
you to
going to
your
defer to our
expertise.
experts
Okay.
on that because they're going to understand the cost structure of that. And what we don't want to wind up with is creating such expensive buildings that we have to come back in and provide extravagant TIF rebates or abatement
Exactly.
processes back to. So there's a balance here. And I defer to our friends here to help us strike that right balance with them hearing from us that our standards are probably higher than what's currently in the code of what we hope to achieve.
do you feel that this is financially feasible, or do you think that we're just like, we're gonna make it so that places aren't gonna want to build or rebuild here?
I think if we made every building in town 90% brick, that would be not financially feasible, but if you're providing options, I think the university corridor is sort of a special district. So I think it's defensible to say we want this higher quality. And in the CC district and the light industrial districts, I think we probably want to be a little more flexible, maybe not all brick or, but focus more on the Class A's, the percentages, and they'd have more options. Because if you look at a building like Aldi's, for example, a lot of those companies have very standardized materials that they use. They may not, most likely won't meet your 50 or 90% brick. So kind of want to give them some options and some, I don't want to say flexibility, but more options.
So if using that example, like obviously we already have Aldi, but let's say a company like Aldi wanted to come in here and we had these design standards and they wanted to submit something that wasn't a design standards, is that Board of Appeals, or is that planning and zoning can make the recommendation to approve
I
in
would-
lieu of?
I would think that's something that they end up working with your planning staff. And we talk about what they can and cannot do, and they, they do have some ability to adjust those materials. And often what I've seen over the years is you say, no, I need you to do this, and they come back and they say, well, how about if I do this instead, or, use a brick tip-up panel versus, brick lay by, different. And you have some back and forth. If I guess you get to the point where we can only make 48% instead of 50, that could be a question for the zoning board of adjustment. Another option would be to write some language in there about if you can't make these, it's a conditional use permit or a planned unit development. And I think there's a little bit of flexibility then in those.
That was my question as well. Could we, if they couldn't come up with that, is that something that they would be able to approach one of the boards, whichever one it may be, and ask for approval? And then, if the board approves it, then does it come to council to approve also, or does it? I know last time, Joseph, we talked a little bit while you were here, like there is the appeal and that doesn't go to city council, that goes to.
Depends if you go through that conditional use permit process, which I would encourage us to avoid, so that if council knows what they want, they can address council with that variance, not variance request, and work to find that happy medium. So again, I defer back to Bolton and Menk to try to draft this in a way that provides some flexibility, particularly if you get into a Walmart type building. That's not a University Avenue, but you've got to be a very nice, very wealthy community to get 100% brick Walmart building. I think I've seen them out there before, but they're few and far between. So we have to decide whether we want to push that hard or create some flexibility. We need to get into that type of a building.
And where this has happened.
Okay, so we are University Avenue corridor, 90% brick. And the remainder is on the facade. It's Class A, right? That's for that. And then as far as community wide, we're looking into something as far as Class A materials, but we may not. Because in your opinion, Adam, you're following that same opinion, adopting a community wide standard for 90% brick everywhere would probably be overly prohibited and discourage building. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, but again, adopting something as far as Class A would be not so much.
Not so much. And then if there was a percentage attached to it, a lower percentage would allow for that. Not saying flexibility, but options. And wouldn't deter development as much.
Any more discussion on that? All right, that's item 1 of 30. Let's move on to the next one.
Next one is accessory dwelling units. Yeah, just hang out. So an accessory dwelling unit is often, you've probably heard it called granny flats, garage apartments, mother-in-law apartments, or whatever, there's a million different names for them. They tend to be a smaller independent residential unit that's either attached or somehow associated with a single-family dwelling located on a regular single-family dwelling lot. They can be like the picture here on the screen. They can be a standalone building. You usually find those like in the rear yards. They could be attached to the main dwelling. They can be part of the main dwelling, either an upper floor or lower floor dwelling. Sometimes their garage apartments are over the garage, or even converted garages, which is probably not something you want to see a lot of in Iowa with winter weather conditions. But there's a lot of different formats they can take. And there's been quite a lot of study on why communities are adopting these. There are a number of benefits. One of them is you're expanding your affordable housing options for both renters and the homeowners. Homeowners can have a unit rented. It helps them with their mortgage payment. It's helpful for people trying to either age in place They can have a caregiver on the site or a family member or switch. So, maybe the aging people are in the smaller unit and the family members are in the larger. It also tends to have some helps reduce the environmental impact of new construction because you're building on an existing lot. Currently, if we go to the next slides, ADUs are not a permitted use in either the current zoning ordinance or the proposed code. If the council wants to allow them, there's a number of things you want to consider. It's not that difficult to write an ordinance that allows them, but I think there's some, for example, would you want them to be permitted or conditional use? How many would you want to allow on any given lot? And often there's a minimum perhaps and a maximum size for those units. From occupancy, a number of ordinances require that in order to build an ADU, the primary dwelling has to be occupied by the homeowners. So you're not having two rental parcels. Where do you put them? Where should they be located on the lot? What should the setbacks be? What are height and roof types? What kind of materials do you make of them? When we talk about character, we're talking about how does it fit in with the existing dwelling on the lot? Parking is often a big issue, with these, because you are adding additional tenants, usually maybe with a car. And then entrances, where should those entrances be? Some other things that you'd want to talk about that don't necessarily need to go in the zoning ordinance, but you want to think about is, should ADUs have a separate sewer service or connection or even meter? How do you want to handle that? So again, what we're asking for the council is, just how would you like us to proceed? I don't expect you to answer all these questions tonight. You do want to move forward. We can come up with some ideas. I think in the email Adam sent you early, he had a link. It was either Des Moines or Polk County. Is that the right county? It was Des Moines, and they had a lot of really nice information on ADUs if you want to look at those. I guess, again, this would require that we go back to the planning commission and do another public hearing.
So what's curious is I'm familiar with at least half a dozen ADUs that currently reside in Windsor Heights. One's my neighbor, as a matter of fact. And one of the concerns is discriminatory practices if they are rental units. So I would imagine that's another consideration, yes?
Yes, if they're rental units, and I think the difference is early on, often cities allowed mother-in-law apartments, where you had another family member. And it's very hard to, as the house gets sold, how do you say that's not another unit? So, yeah, there's some rental considerations you're going to think about.
Was this something, this wasn't originally proposed or discussed by anyone, I don't think.
Didn't Teresa ask to have it added at the last meeting?
I think I'm guilty on this one. Teresa had mentioned the signage. I just wasn't aware where council stood on it, and I didn't see it addressed in the code, so.
Why, so I'd see the greatest benefit here is greater urban density, I suppose. I think doing the math, I think Windsor Heights is has the highest density in the state of Iowa. We're potentially going to add more. I'll let council say what they have to say. I do not see the need to add anything related to ADUs.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm interested to hear what the Planning and Zoning Commission has to say about it, if they haven't, were they interested at all or no?
They have never brought this up or proposed it or discussed it.
Was
during
it,
this process.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I think presenting it to them as an option would be interesting. I'm interested in continuing to learn more about the ADUs and thinking about the expansion of, or the change in the footprint, the impermeable surface, I think, of residential properties that you talked about at the last council meeting that might create this opportunity for people that didn't before because they previously were almost at their limit for non-grass, or whatever, non-landscape yard. But, you know, certainly acknowledge that there could be some issues that go along with it, like is it allowed to be a rental property and what's the permitting for that and everything. But I think that we should be considering this before somebody approaches with the ask. I know that Councilwoman Susan Judkins from Clive brought it up recently, expanding ADUs and thinking about the housing shortage that the metro is probably facing.
The
Could be
affordable
good,
housing.
affordable housing.
Not a housing shortage, affordable.
Sure, that too.
I do also like having this brought up before, having us look at this before somebody brings it up to us. I also see that there's a benefit that at least it will be inspected and people like the fire department know that this is actually a dwelling where people are living versus whatever they think it may be. You know, that's always good to have on the radar too, to know that these are occupied buildings versus just
A storage shed.
Yeah.
or- Yeah.
Plus then there's regulations.
Write that down as a future consideration, maybe not necessarily as part of this current code adoption, but keep discussing it and moving forward.
Well, I think what counselors are indicating is that they would perhaps like, I don't know, a boilerplate version, something like that, a generic version to at least be taken to planning and zoning to see what their thoughts are about it and to come back, just share what their thoughts are about expanding the conversation.
I don't think this is something that we have to like be right, you know, we have enough on our plate, but I think that this could take kind of a secondary.
Okay. The next item is electric vehicle charging stations. A little less complex, we hope. So as more and more electric vehicles are being purchased by the general public, a lot of communities are looking at how to plan for the needed infrastructure, and whether that should be regulatory or incentivized. And essentially that infrastructure is charging stations. The current ordinance, normally you would find these in your parking standards. The current ordinance doesn't really include anything. It would not be very difficult to add something, but what we would want to know is, should these requirements apply to all uses or only certain uses? In some of the research I did, some communities actually require every parking structure, whether it's an individual personal garage or something more multiple, to, if not include in a charging station, to be at least EV ready. Other communities only require the infrastructure for commercial and industrial, or multifamily commercial and industrial development. If you say wanted to go that route, just apply it to those. What percentage of the required parking spaces should be required to be have chargers, or conversely be charger ready? And when I say charger ready, usually what that means is you have to extend the electricity to those locations or have them in a location where electricity is good. Do you want to regulate what level of charger? And really the level has to do with how long it takes to charge a vehicle. So level 1 is like the 120 volt that you can plug in at home. Level 2, which is most of what you see, is a little bigger than that. And then level 3 is the really fast charging ones. And then The other piece you want to consider, whether it's part of this ordinance or somewhere down the road, is what do we do if we have a change in use? And I'll use Aldi's again, and say Aldi's becomes an office building, or an office building becomes a more a higher intensity use. Do we require that they go back and retrofit those parking lots for the EV stations or the EV charging stations? That could be something you could put on a back burner. I think the immediate question is, do you want to require them, and where do you figure that percentage should be? Most ordinances I saw were anywhere between the 1% to 5% range.
What's 1% to 5%?
Usually, for example, if you're required to have 100 parking spaces, 1% would be one parking space has to have an EV charger.
So if you only have to have 2 parking spaces like little brother with. as
Well,
it's
then you
proposed,
round up.
So then you would have to have one of those 2 parking spaces.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that EV charging, while super necessary, I think businesses providing that is a benefit to attract people and not part of their core services. We need to make sure that they've got parking for the people that are going to come spend money in their store. But I don't feel a strong need to require EV parking. I think there should be maybe incentives, and we've explored our options at Walmart for helping them add them. But I don't think requiring them is necessary currently.
What about requiring them if the project is of a certain size?
Like the Windsor. I
Right.
think about that, and I think maybe 1 parking spot would be nice. I mean, I don't know that I would go so far as saying requirement, but I don't know.
Well, if you
I
don't make it a
don't have-
requirement, they're not going to do it.
I don't have a strong opinion either way. I just don't want it to be a business like Little Brother that has 2 parking spots, has to have one of those 2 parking spots.
I think
That's-
the percentage thing is probably a bit restrictive. I think that would be much better if a consideration is if a project is of a certain size, so for instance, a car wash, but you wouldn't charge at a car wash, I would hope. That, if it's of a certain size, you have to put in at least 1 EV charging station.
And then the next question would be, at what level do you require them to have?
Well, I don't think anyone uses level 1, do they? Does anyone build with a level 1? Yeah.
It's usually
That's
you require a level
residential.
2 or level.
Yeah. And then my second, but I think the problem leads into there is, Justin, what does our grid need, like updating across the entire city to even accommodate those types of things?
Yeah, yes, it kind of goes back to our discussions, like Laura mentioned, that Walmart, for instance, has the power capability. I think that one was a level 3, whereas Colby Park, we looked at a level 3. We couldn't do it because you're running, so you couldn't do it. You could do it, you're talking very expensive to run level 3 power down there, whereas a level 2 is available most places. Because if you're getting a level 2 in a bigger building, your service is pretty high. For instance, I guess also to Lauren's point about demand, we're gonna do a couple developments in private developments, Wisconsin or whatever. They're not required, they're putting them in because it's an amenity to their residents, right? These are mixed use, commercial on the bottom floor, residential on top. They added 4 in one of them, Wisconsin. We're at 1 in town, like 2 or 3 in town in Des Moines. Not required, just because that they see it as an amenity to their customers or residents type of thing. So I've seen it both ways. Yes, a big part of it is power, but if you're doing a bigger building like that, you're getting good power need anyways, so.
And I'm not sure, I'm not an expert, but I have gone down the Google rabbit hole when car shopping. I don't think that there's a lot of level 2 chargers that are like commercially, like that where you can go and pay to use a charger. I think the level 2 are often like the washing machine or electric dryer style plug-in, and you're mounting those in your house. Yeah. So like I could see an apartment complex would have a bunch of those in a row maybe, but if they're adding it outside the building, it's definitely going to be a level 3.
Yeah, I was just in Pennsylvania and stayed at a hotel, and the hotel had one level 2, 2 parking spots, lots of parking spots out there, of course, but 2 parking spots dedicated to a dual level 2, which seemed to be appropriate. While I was there, they had trouble with one of those, but then because of our close proximity also to 235 in the interstate, it would seem to me that at Walmart, for example, it would be nice to have a level 3 as people pass through. And as I understand it, if you have an electric vehicle, you're going down the road and you need a charge, it will bring up a map of where those charging stations are. So that could be a benefit to our community.
So what would a business, if we would say, if you're going to be over 15,000 square feet, 20,000 square feet, 30,000 square feet, you'd have to have one. That would lead places like Walmart. If we were to build Walmart again, then they would have, I don't even know how many square feet Walmart, I don't even want to Google that. But, you know, if we have a higher number than if, you know, Apple Valley decides, or not Apple Valley, but if 66th and University decides that they're going to change things around a little bit by Big Brother, then maybe they don't have enough square footage in that building to make there be the requirement for the EV. If they want it, great. If they want to put it in, but if they don't want to, I'm also okay with not having it in there.
Okay.
I mean,
Mayor Jones, when you suggested a certain number of parking spots, what came to mind for the minimum requirement of parking spots that they would need to provide an EV? And again, to be clear, the EV would be for profit because they're collecting revenue from whoever manages it.
Yeah,
as
I
well.
I don't know if it's necessarily parking spots, but I just think of like maybe the size of the lot, or I mean, whatever the size of Remax is, whatever that is, they should have charging stations there. Whatever the size of Aldi is, they should have charging stations there. So I don't know the specifics of the size of if you're just going by more than, you know, so many spots, then you need to have an EV. I think that might be a good compromise because obviously, then if you have such a big parking lot, you should be putting EV charging stations in there, I think.
If I'm wrong, though, there's nothing prohibits somebody from parking in an EV parking stall, even though you don't have EV parking, right?
Correct. True.
Not the ones I've seen. I think to be polite, you try
Well,
not
yes,
to.
right, but
we're not all polite.
True.
And Mayor, when looking at all these footprint, you're looking at a size of like 20,000 square feet-ish.
Okay.
So if that's the kind of size you're looking for, it'd be kind of that number, or we can adjust as is.
Thank you for that perspective. Appreciate that.
Okay. Well, I don't make that call. You're looking for counsel. I just think it's important because we obviously passed a resolution where we are trying to reduce carbon emissions. And so I think it's important to start, I hate to say it, requiring things because I realize letting the market decide is great on a lot of fronts. But I don't know if the EV revolution is quite coming along as fast as we need it to, considering it was 92 degrees today in October. So I think adding some requirements is probably in our best interest. That is just me.
Is it
Size?
is it worthwhile for us to talk about incentivizing businesses who add a charging station versus requiring it? I'm thinking about some of the redevelopment projects that we have coming up, like Sherwood Forest. If this is something that would get in the way of that project, something being redeveloped, I think that that creates a risk, right? But is there a way that we can add incentives for businesses to add EV charging stations instead of requiring?
Did we apply for a Mid-American grant or something along those lines? Is that something that a business could apply for? Have we looked at any of that to see if there are any business grants available if you wanted to put this in that would, instead of the city incentivizing it, they could get money from somebody else instead of our
Property owner is
pockets?
the one that applies for the Mid-American grants that I've seen out there, and they look at proximity to or proximity to interstates, generally speaking, for where they award those grants. So there's funding sources out there, depending on where you're at. We're probably a pretty good candidate for a couple of stations based off of that.
The one. It's more of the FPO that we applied for those two, the FPO, that was more of a national.
I couldn't remember how, I mean, I remember
That was
the spiel, but
to get private to help with a private company. But they wanted specific locations. It wasn't like, oh, here's 100 grand that you can sprinkle around multiple places.
So are you saying, are you wanting to explore incentives or requirements or neither?
I would like to see incentives. And that could come in the form of city or assistance from city in applying for perhaps grants.
Which wouldn't necessarily be part of the zoning code,
Correct.
right? So then that seems that the answer would be no.
And again, it's always something you can come back to.
Adam and Nate, it looks like there's a chat comment. Is that Joseph weighing in on this at all?
Yes. Incentives over requirements, put it to economic development.
that's a good.
Okay. All right, non-conforming development.
Okay, so
Everyone just make sure mics are on to do a mic check.
Mike check.
Check.
The red lights are on.
Yeah.
Okay, just so- Very loud.
okay, non-conforming development. So we did a very cursory review. The best way we move a couple slides up. The best way we could do this was take the existing and proposed standards and kind of compare them. And keeping in mind the R1 and current R1 and R2 district are now R1, R3 is now R2, and R4 is now R3. So this chart that you have on the screen kind of shows you the existing requirements on the top row for lot area and then the proposed requirements. In most cases, we incorporated the lesser or smaller standard into the new zoning ordinance or carried that forward. The only difference would be in the CC district, which originally had a 5 to 7,200 square foot area. And we upped that to 10,000 square feet. And keeping in mind, the CC district is a combination of the old office, community commercial, and general commercial districts. It's intended for larger, more intense commercial uses. So the larger lot area is appropriate in that area. Lot widths, we did the same thing. We went, again, we generally incorporated the smaller or lesser standard into the new district. And I guess one change would be in the UC district where it ranged from 20 to 50. We kind of split the difference and went at 25 foot lot width. If you wanted a more detailed review, that could be done. That would require we go get GIS parcel data and go through that. So it would be a little bit more time consuming and require just more information. So the next slide is just a bit of a summary of some of the most relevant non-conforming standards that are included in the proposed ordinance. The reason that we get concerned about nonconformities or creating nonconformities is what is the impact to the existing uses? Often the biggest issue, especially staff gets these questions, I'm sure, what happens if the house or a non-conforming structure is damaged or destroyed? Can they be rebuilt? Well, the proposed language actually is pretty non-conforming friendly, I would say. So for existing development, any maintenance or structure or site feature shall not cause the building to become non-conforming. If it already is non-conforming, the change to the building or site shall not cause them to be more non-conforming. So you can still, if you have a house that doesn't meet its setbacks, you can generally go up. You might not be able to go out, or you could go out. You might have to do some little, adjustments to maintain the required setbacks, but you can still do it. Non-conforming lots, if it's a non-conforming lot now and it exists, it's a legal non-conforming lot, it's still buildable. It's exempt from that. You're not depriving anyone of their building rights. And non-conforming structures, and this is the one that on a daily basis you get when someone's buying a new house and, they've done their survey and they find out it's maybe not meet setbacks. Can it be built? And you're asked to write a letter. And this provision does say, yes, you can. If it continues, it can be, if it existed on the effective date, it can be continued, repaired, maintained, or altered. It can be added or enlarged. The conditions are, again, that any additions have to meet the current requirements. And if it is damaged by fire, explosion, storm, or other calamity, except flood damages, because that's covered under floodplain and FEMA, it may be repaired and reconstructed, provided there is no increase in the degree of nonconformity. So you can have the same footprint size, you couldn't make it bigger. So, any questions on that?
What are you asking?
We're
council to
just
do?
giving you information. If you need more information, then we'd have to go get more, we'd need more data to do that for you.
I think on the previous slide where it talked about the UC and TC districts have been combined into UC, I think. I'm blanking on his name. There's a resident. Yes, thank you, Bob Bishop. Mr. Bishop expressed some concerns and shared some history with it. I want to make sure that we're fully addressing that before we commit to combining the UC and TC districts.
That's actually the next thing we'll be talking about. If
will
if that's a concern.
Yeah.
Thank you.
On that, what is the last one, the LI? But am I missing like what that means? Or is that like the last one over 10,000, 10,000, 50, 50 on the screen? What is LI? What does that mean?
Light industrial.
Which we don't have any. We don't have any industrial, right? So unless 3E, unless 3E would be like the only one, but
I don't think it's zoned.
yeah, I don't think we have any. So. All right, let's combine districts then.
Okay, so the next slide, this is this map is the current zoning map, and everything outlined in that red line is either the University Corridor District or the Town Center District. The UC district is the darker color, Town Center is the pink. Combining these districts, we would use this same boundary. It would all just be one color at this point. During the drafting of the zoning ordinance and during our reviews with the Planning and Zoning Commission or the workshops, both of these districts were reviewed. Included as part of that review were the purpose of each district, existing and potential development included in the district, the comparison of uses permitted by right or as a CUP in the ordinance, the existing development standards in both districts, and then also what is the overall vision included in the comprehensive plan for this area. So the next slide, on the left is the purpose of the TC and the UC district in the existing ordinance. These are actually very similar. Both focus on mixed uses, both focus on design and aesthetics. They both talk about the main street and the town center, and they both encourage pedestrian-oriented development. So the new statement in the proposed district, the purpose statement, basically incorporates all these similarities. Notes that it's intended for commercial facilities. And I probably have the wrong one on this slide now that I look at it, but it's basically intended, they're very similar in sight. I'm sorry, I put the wrong one there. But anyway, it's very similar. It talks about the mixed uses and the design and the main street and so on. If we go into the next slide, these tables are the current uses in the UC and TC district, where the green are permitted uses and the kind of yellowish are conditional uses, and then the gray are uses that are not permitted in one or the other districts. And you can see that they are pretty well aligned throughout the district. There's a couple of areas where there are differences. The biggest differences tends to be in those areas that are in uses that are not permitted, that may be permitted in the UC district, but not in the TC district. The next slide is the proposed use tables. Again, very similar to what we did in the other non-conforming tables. We carried the least restrictive standard forward to the combined district. So to give you an example, in the current table, a duplex would not be permitted in the TC district, but permitted in the UC. We have carried it forward, so it's still permitted in the UC district. The development standards on the next slide.
Real quickly, where does gas station fall? Is that under convenience?
No, where did they fall?
I believe we have them no longer under. I believe they're under auto services now.
Yes, that's what they are, auto
Use
services.
permit.
So
Yeah.
they're conditional use.
Yeah.
Thank you.
On the use standards, we did, as we talked about in the previous one, the minimum lot area in the UC district is currently 5,000 square feet. We carried that standard forward. There is no minimum lot area currently in the town center district. The minimum lot width in the UC is 50 feet, and in the TC district, it's 20. The proposed lot width in that district is 25 feet. The front yard setbacks, this is where probably the biggest change is. In the front yard goes from 25 feet to 0 in the UC district. That is currently at 0 in the TC district. The interior side yards and rear yards remain the same. There are buffer yards also required in the existing ordinance, and they're required between a more intensive use and a less intensive use. In the existing ordinances, they range from 10 to 20 feet, where the larger buffer yard is against R1 or R2 districts, and it kind of goes down from there. What that is currently proposed is that buffer yard be 10 feet adjacent to all residential districts.
I'm just gonna say, this is very confusing to me. I feel as if this would have been better suited in a work session where we could have kind of explained this a little bit more to me, because this makes not a lot of sense as I'm just looking at it. So the existing setback for the front yard that is going at 25, the proposed is 0. So
Right.
can you explain that to me in a very dummied down, I have no idea. But this is not in my wheelhouse, and I Googled, but that's either a good or a bad thing.
So right now, if you were to build a building along University Avenue, The required front yard setback from the right of way line would be 25 feet. Under the proposed ordinance, that required front yard would be 0 feet.
So you could build it right up to the right of way.
Right.
So you could be walking out your front door into the right of way.
Well, you would have to, yeah, I mean, in the current town center, it's the same way, but obviously when you're doing something like that, you're making sure your doors don't open outward or usually you're talking larger scale buildings, downtown type buildings, doors open inward. If you have overhangs, you need to push your building back a little bit to make sure the overhangs are not in the right of way.
These are minimums as well.
These,
They
yeah,
don't need to be built right on the right of way. It's a minimum and it's supposed to be able to create in this town center UC combined district walkability for pedestrians to be and closeness and to build that kind of town center commercial node.
yeah, that Main Street atmosphere is basically.
So 25 feet, if I'm looking at 25 feet, what are we looking at as far as space wise? Like the width of this room, the length of this room, what would be?
Pretty big distance. It's a big, 25 feet, it's pretty big for a setback. So
Mhm.
that doesn't help you answer your question.
How
at all.
big are these ceiling tiles?
2
Three,
feet by 2
I think
feet.
these are probably 3-foot ceiling tiles,
2 foot.
2 foot.
2 foot.
Yeah, so
It's the width of this room.
it is.
So it's almost the length of the room.
So I understand maybe 25 is a little much, but 0 is not much.
Mhm.
So I am not comfortable with that at all because I know we say minimums, but I'm one of those people that, oh, well, if it's a minimum, that's the least I have to do. So, that's what I see could happen. And that to me, I mean, I don't know.
So currently, the mixed use building that's just to the east of City Hall gravitates there and several other places, okay? So I'm trying to picture this. So we have a curb, we have a grass right of way, we have a sidewalk, and then we have the building. Okay, so where is 0 feet on that? Would that mean that building should have been moved right up to the sidewalk?
It doesn't have to go anywhere because that's a minimum again,
Yeah.
but it could sit right where it is.
Justin could
Always.
answer.
I don't think those are right up, like, I think if you looked at right up against the right of way, you're probably talking to, what's the bar across the street?
Centerfield, yeah.
Those are probably like 0 lot lines. I
Got
think
it.
Even the other ones, like Little Brother set back 2 to 5 feet,
Yeah.
maybe something like that. This other one, maybe it's set back a little bit. I don't think it's 0, just going off of memory.
Little Brother's 10 foot, the Gravitate building's 20 foot approximately.
Is that right?
With the sidewalk being partially in the right of way on the Gravitate building and partially on private property, it
Got
looks
it.
like, since they turned that into a trail. That's what it looks like from the map at least.
I appreciate that because that does a little bit more visualization for me than this paper because there's a lot of numbers and yeah.
So
Good.
the proposal is
Minimum
zero, kind of across the board, right? But still requiring 10 for residential districts.
The
That's
buffer.
a buffer.
So if it's the side or the rear or wherever it's adjacent to a residential zoning district, that requires a 10-foot buffer.
So that could be
Minimum.
right up against any residential
Mhm.
dwelling units of any kind to create that, yeah.
What about 10
Mhm.
for everything?
Yes, that's going to generally be an interior side lot line or a rear lot line.
Well, I'm talking about if
He's
the
proposing
proposal is
that.
currently
Proposal.
is 0
Zero,
across the
proposing
board, what
10.
about maybe 10? Is that,
Yeah,
Well, the proposed buffer yard is 10 feet right now, yeah,
Oh.
this.
He's
I think we're
he's
talking about-
talking
the
he's
other
talking
one?
about
Yeah,
the
I
front
would- I
yard.
would be in
He's saying
favor
he's
of-
proposing that it be 10.
Yeah.
I would be in favor of 10 for everything. And, if if, for example, where Little Brother is and any other businesses in that strip, just a couple doors down, were redeveloped, that there could be a variance or whatever to approve there versus us creating an opportunity that has more buildings up to the sidewalk and up to so I'd prefer 10 and that a developer could approach us for a variance or exception.
So something like Little Brother would become, if this was to go through, it would become a non-conformity, but so they could redevelop and
Okay,
repair everything without going through a variance process, as long as they don't increase that non-conformity. So if they want to become closer to the street, anything
gotcha.
like that, they wouldn't be able to do that. But it could remain as is for any further future use.
I like 10.
So you're thinking 10-foot side and side street yard,
I think 10-foot front
Front.
and side.
anywhere it's adjacent to the street.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Okay,
Anybody have any comments on the uses? Or was that pretty much okay across the board?
That is confusing to me. It is clear as mud. So I was hoping that there would be a little bit more kind of description as to why even, because wasn't this something that there was a 4-1 vote on too?
Yes.
I think
In PNC, that was specifically about the
Setbacks.
So
Okay,
none of the uses were ever brought up as issues.
okay.
I think that the point of the creation of the town center district was to encourage greater density, because if you look at the minimum lot width, it's 50 to 20, right?
Mhm.
I mean, I think that was the purpose of the creation of that district.
the greater density, and also town centers, when you look at more like downtowns, you're looking at more street friendly, more pedestrian friendly, and doing that, you bring the buildings up close to the street because it feels, think about when you're walking in a downtown area or a main street, it just feels friendlier when you have those streets and windows right at your
Sure.
level versus big wide open expanses.
And so there's currently 0 minimum lot area, 0 setbacks on the front, right? I
Right.
mean, 0 kind of across the board, which is what the purpose of the town center was, to create that greater, like, I assume, how far is Mojito's patio from the street? It's like,
Arm length?
yeah, it's like right there on the street. So I think that was the purpose of the town center district, was to encourage that greater density and closeness and space. But so are we have councils made a decision on, or advising you to, make everything 10. Are you asking also about combining the districts? Did we talk about that? Because I don't think we did.
That's where we're going, I think.
Well, I thought we did, and that the slide, like page 485, 2 slides maybe ago. 3 maybe.
Yeah, if you go back to the map, is that the one you're thinking of?
The one that says the purpose of the UC and TC, we went from the existing ordinance to the proposed ordinance, right? We talked about that, and then we went to those maps
Right.
or graphs.
Yeah, you went to the tables. yeah.
Whatever. But can I ask another question? So we talked about the minimum lot width in feet. Can you explain that a little bit? Because the existing is 50 and it's going down to 25.
Right.
So the lot width, so if I wanted to build a building, I could make it be the size of this room width-wise? Is that what it's?
Yes.
So, well, actually, the lot just has to be that size so that
Right.
I could make it a building that's a little tiny thing that's like,
Right, and then
10
again, if
feet,
you're
yeah.
if you're looking at a town
Yeah.
center, lots are usually, it seems really small, but that's about how big they are. Again, you're not having to accommodate parking on those lots.
Right.
It's more compact, denser development.
And also having with those 0 setbacks, you can have wall to wall for
Mhm.
more businesses in a row in those smaller lots. I mean, they're usually not as wide, but they're deeper most commonly because they still have to hit that minimum
square foot.
lot size, so.
Wouldn't we typically see something that is like one developer develops it with multiple, like unit A, B, and C versus it being parceled out by lots? I think, I don't know.
You're accommodating the existing development of the Little Brother stretch there with the 25 foot so that they're not conforming. But yeah, you know, if somebody were to come in front of City Hall, it's all gonna be one lot. most
Yeah.
likely.
So since the Little Brother building is already built, then it would be, you know,
Non-conforming.
non-conforming, but already there, so that, are we creating any challenges by moving it up to 50, I guess?
I guess, yeah, like, why did we decide to change it down to 25? Was it just?
Or moving it to 25, sorry.
I think it was a compromise. For example, in the TC district, the current standard is 20, a 20-foot lot width. So the 25 feet's a little bigger than that, but not as wide as the 50-foot lot width.
You've got some houses along University that
Yes.
have 35-foot wide lots right now, in addition to the Little Brother stretch there. But again, I don't think you'll see redevelopment on those unless you see aggregation of multiple of those lots. So it's probably moot other than you're creating non-conformances, which isn't a great idea, in my opinion.
So under the existing, oh wait, no, because under the existing, would they be the town center 20 on University? So it doesn't really matter. They're not non-conforming, or are they already non-conforming
If you
under the
start
35?
Shrinking the minimum lot width, those will all become non-conforming, which
Wait.
they have rebuildability, so.
Under the university corridor, they are not non-conforming.
Okay,
But if we adopt,
if we go to the proposed
if we
25,
merge them all, right, and then also we make it to the 25, then yes, they will become non-conforming.
If you change it to like 50. they'll become non-conforming.
I was gonna say with the 25, oh, sorry, with change to the 25, the only things that would be affected are any lot that has gone by the TC minimum and hit that 20. Those are the only lots that would become non-conforming. The current UC lots that are 50, have a minimum of 50, they would not be non-conforming because they would meet that 25 minimum.
So it looks like it's just 4 houses that are on 67th, or sorry, 63rd, 4th, 65th, just south of the Gravitate building, right? Those are the 4, okay.
Yeah.
But the ones on University themselves are already non-conforming.
I've confused myself. So
So
I'm
the
just gonna
cur-
sit here and listen.
So I'm thinking about, I'm just looking at the map here. So the ones, all the houses that are on the Brown University here, it's saying that it's currently zoned,
That's UC.
that's UC, yep. So it's existing 50, and there are some that I don't think
There's
look
no
like
way
they're
some of those
50.
lots are
Yeah.
50 feet
Yeah, and
long.
if they're, you know, they were.
So they're already
probably
existing.
there.
So they're already
So they're
legally
already
non-conforming right
non-conforming.
now. And if we were to go down to this 25, they could become conforming to
Gotcha. Okay,
because of that.
gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah,
And we would rather have them conforming.
the non-conforming.
Everybody terribly clear on this?
Clear as mud.
Plan a work session for this next time.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, well, I think we've only got what, 4 left?
Hopefully we can.
So
Parkland dedication?
just to make sure I have this right, you were talking about just really what we're changing in that table is the setbacks on the front yard and the side street yard to 10 feet.
Correct.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay, yep, so we're going to parkland dedication now. So feel free to go next slide. So parkland dedications, the dedication of space on residentially developed parcel to be set aside for public parks or open space. Or in lieu of dedicating physical space, developer can substitute space on their property with a monetary parkland dedication substitute. So this is allowing for more open and green space, parks to be developed in the community, or to develop funds, to gain funds to update and assist with current parks. This typically is found in a subdivision ordinance. And Windsor Heights doesn't currently have a subdivision ordinance. We go by state statute. So I guess kind of the question for this is, do we want to attempt to develop something like this? They're usually fairly extensive. They can get as complicated as depending on how many people live per unit type, and then calculating acreage that should be set aside per person. And then calculating that based upon how many units and what unit types are in a certain development. And then they have to commit that amount of land on their parcel. Or it could be 5% of your parcel that's being developed has to be committed to open space or parks, or you have to pay a certain amount that would equate to 5% of that in lieu of.
So I have a question. A couple of years ago, knocking doors, and I can't remember what street it was, but there was a homeowner that had a lot next to their house. And they said, we would love to donate this to the city for a park in this area. Is that what we're talking about?
No. We are talking about if somebody were to take a piece of land, say, we want to build 5 houses on it, or I guess.
The best example is probably the Windsor.
Windsor, exactly. So using the Windsor, they would have to develop based upon how many residents are going to be in there. A certain part of their land would have to be dedicated to a park.
Got it. Okay.
That
And
is
in
a
lieu of
very
that, they
simple.
could give us money to help us fund green space someplace else.
Yes.
And how do you figure out the amount of money? Is that something that is easy, or is it as,
I think that's the part of the formula that they were talking about.
It is the first, what I described was the first step, and then the second step is applying a monetary value to that number.
So Adam, I think this was AJ. I think this was your concern. Is that right?
Yeah, I think where it comes into play, given that it's a fully built out city, is if the desire for the comp plan is to see reuse along University of these single family residences into mixed use, and over time, 50 years, you may see those single family houses go away and turn into multiples of that. You see maybe 1,000 residential units over time on University Ave. At that point, you probably are going to want to have additional green space along that university corridor. And so long-term, if you're going to see projects like the Windsor eventually take shape, you want to start planning for additional parkland space or the cash infusion to improve your existing park spaces, i.e. Colby Park and Lions Park.
And that would normally be in a subdivision ordinance outside of the zoning ordinance.
Got it.
Well, so it isn't, right? So it would become part of our zoning code specifically. It wouldn't be, okay?
And then apply to residential zoning districts or
Mixed use?
mixed use
Yes.
zoning districts as
And
well.
could it be made not terribly complicated, or does it?
We can make it pretty simple to go based upon just the predetermined percentage of whatever someone's trying to develop that has to be dedicated to parkland or open space or cash in lieu of that.
I like it.
I think that has support. I don't know about the specifics of it. Just as simple as possible.
it's simple.
We'll go to parking standards. Okay, so the parking requirements within the proposed zoning ordinance, they were decided upon through the workshops with the planning and zoning commission. And the big thing was to lower the parking minimums for development within Windsor Heights. So next slide. So the specific ones we're going to review were the ones brought to our attention, specifically for bars, daycare services, multifamily dwellings, restaurants. Next slide. So you can see what they are proposed to be, which is the larger number, which is for bars, 1 per 500 square feet, the primary building, and then follow suit. And then the smaller text, you'll see what they previously were. We both tried to, through talking with the Planning and Zoning Commission, both tried to lower it and also lower the parking requirements and parking minimums while making it very simple to calculate as well. Some of them get into specific calculations that can be difficult for some. So what we looked at, if you go to the next slide, we're doing some calculations on some that we could with not having basics to what a daycare service would be on an average, or average restaurant space, dedicating certain amount to certain amount of sizes. But the average bar in this context would be required to have 4.5 parking spots, being rounded up to 5. And then in the previous would be 14.5 parking spots rounded up to 15. So a change of 10 parking spots. Same going to multifamily dwellings. If 100 dwellings on the current, it'd be required to have 100 parking spots. And then in the previous 1.5 per efficiency or 1-bedroom unit, 2 per other units. That could have anywhere between 150 and 200 parking spots required. So large difference in that. And so if we continue, just some of the things to consider. I mean, for developers, the parking is expensive. You get pushback consistently on parking requirements, even as is. Environmental impact is exponentially negative for more parking. Currently, there is also public parking available, and these numbers, again, are minimums. The market drives what people need for certain uses in certain areas, and people will make sure when they are developing or redeveloping an area, they have enough parking. A common issue is that shift and change in a use and in the intensity and requirement of parking. I mean, that's an existing issue as of now. If something were to change intensity and require more parking, that would be an issue for them now, not only in this proposed zoning ordinance. So I'm kind of asking, are these minimums too low, and should they be adjusted from where they sit right now as proposed?
Asking with regards to the 4.
With regards to the 4, the others, we really didn't have any complaints about. It was specifically these 4, and specifically more services provided, such as bars and restaurants. Those were the ones of greatest concern. And then slightly the multifamily. Currently, we have it 1 per dwelling unit, and previously it was adjusted based upon what type of dwelling unit and how many were in the building.
I'm thinking about the Windsor at this point. I can't recall how many parking spots that they have, but it's a 105 unit building, I believe.
I know they significantly exceeded what the proposed were, and I believe they exceeded what are current.
They either exceeded or just above it, from what I remember.
All right, thank you.
So page 496. So this is what we are looking at, the proposal. This is what we would. Oh, you're fine.
Like that.
What
Oh,
page are you talking about?
That one.
This one?
This
Yeah,
one. So
this
what you're
one.
seeing is
Wait.
that the larger ones are,
So maybe the average bar, I think what's confusing me is the average bar, the daycare, like. what is-
So I looked at the square footage of dozens of bars. I took the average and then I did those.
Were those in-person site inspections?
Did you?
They were not in person. I can promise you that.
Thank you.
Darn it.
But,
Well,
so based upon the previous previous ordinance and then the proposed ordinance, that's the difference in parking spots that you would see. And that's the difference in minimum that based upon market. If a bar were to come in, say they have a minimum of 5 that they have to put in, they'll, just for staff, they might decide that that's not enough. So they put in however many they're required.
So to understand this correctly, so the average bar, 1 per 500 square feet. Okay. used to be 1 per 200 square feet.
Yes.
That's a difference of 10 parking spots.
Mhm.
I would imagine if I were the bar owner or developer, that I would like the proposed more than I would, yeah. Okay, I'm good.
AJ.
I think you gotta have buildings that will have at least enough parking for their staff on these sorts of uses. My previous example was Little Brother creates a situation of conflict where existing property owners are probably overparked, and thus people are starting to use that parking lot while using another private business owner's business. That creates a conflict. If you want to have no minimum parking, I think that's good aspirational way of where to look at things. Just be aware that you're going to create conflicts within the community based off of the physical layout that we have today. And 1 per 500 square feet or 0 per 500 square feet, I don't know, makes much difference. You're making a statement one way or another. You either need to park it at essentially 0, like it's being proposed now, or you need to put a requirement in there that's going to be a sufficient number of parking stalls for their customers and employees. So it's a philosophical sort of decision, I think, but it's an important one.
Yeah, but, and so is that something that's put in the code, or are we, because a developer these days, right, letting the market decide, we're talking about, our concern is properties that already exist in this community. But we are going to assume, terrible idea, that a builder is going to put in the appropriate number of spots. And if that is the case, is it your opinion that if a new construction comes in, even these proposed are too minimal, too low?
That's my concern. On top of existing buildings, could see a computer repair shop go away and turn into a restaurant, which would then further exacerbate the existing problem, hypothetically.
There's not really enough off-street parking either on University for even just Little Brother itself with, when you have an hour-long wait to get in.
There's a
But I don't know how
counterbalance,
we
right? I mean,
solve it.
interesting places are underparked. And it creates walkability. It forces you to walk a block or two, but you're willing to do that because it's a good, interesting place. But people will complain about it, particularly if you're adjoining commercial property owner's got a full parking lot and there's no parking for his business when he's paying for that parking lot.
All right. So what's your proposal then?
Fix it with one line.
Just think you need to be aware going forward that there'll be conflicts potentially with what's proposed here. But if that's where we want to head as a community of density and encourage walkability, that may be a trade-off you're all willing to make. But if not, increase the minimum parking for these 4 businesses.
And is it your opinion that it's specifically dedicated to bars and restaurants, sort of high traffic in and out places, not so much the other 2 that are listed as concerns? That being daycares and multifamily.
Yeah, the ones that stuck out to me was the bar and restaurant. If you look at any other community in the metro, you're going to see a higher parking standard than what's proposed kind of across Windsor Heights here, other than some downtown areas.
What is it currently?
It currently is 1 parking spot for 200 square feet. And that's for bars. For restaurants, it gets a little bit more complicated where you can see it's divided into general and drive-in. So it's 1 per 3-person capacity in dining area plus 1 per each 150 square feet in cocktail lounge. And then drive-in is 1 per 50 square feet of customer service area.
Okay.
Yeah. So in looking at those, someone can also design a restaurant that greatly exaggerates either of those numbers to make it look like they need less parking. You can, playing the devil's advocate, could create a drive-in that has almost less than 50 square feet of actual customer service area and then not require one spot.
Do you think
Things like that.
maybe meeting in the middle there would be a better idea, or just leaving it as it is? 1 per 200 square feet seems rather excessive. That's just
I have a question. You mentioned the hypothetical of a computer store becoming a restaurant, but wouldn't that already be
An existing problem,
an
yes.
existing problem, so that,
Existing TC district, which requires no parking, yes.
gotcha. So, I mean,
Am I interpreting that correctly, Trey? But I mean, in a different
Ye-
district,
I-
in a
I think it-
commercial district, they would be required to have parking to make that transition into a different use with the parking requirement.
Yes, they would have to supplement that parking difference. In the TC district, though, it's already an existing problem.
okay.
So can I throw a hypothetical out here for you? I'm sorry.
Oh.
You were pointing out.
No, I was somebody was trying to get back on the Zoom.
Hypothetically, should there come available maybe 3 or 4 lots on University Avenue that can then be transitioned to multi-use, residential up top, commercial on the bottom? There's no parking where I'm thinking there's no parking on the street in this particular area. So that parking would be in the back. So then the question is there enough room if there's a restaurant and a bar there?
So that becomes an interesting hypothetical because you'd have to meet the requirements for the residential.
Correct.
But in a lot of cases, in a lot of communities, if it's mixed use like that, they give some leeway as to the commercial requirements for the parking.
Okay.
But you would need to meet the residential requirements.
Got it.
So I have heard concerns. I love concerns. I like solutions, proposals as to what, sort of density we should encourage then. So I'll just ask this. So as far as this proposed language would be less restrictive than anywhere else?
Yes.
Okay,
From what
so,
we've seen.
I see new construction in Urbandale. I see they built this, I think it's Worldwide Logistics is the name of the building. Just this incredible parking lot. I mean, it is unbelievable. And there's nobody in it. So that is what we want to avoid.
Right.
So if I'm building a bar on Ingersoll Avenue, how many parking spots do I need? If I'm building Star Bar on Ingersoll Avenue, how many parking spots do I need?
You would need,
Well, what is there? What do you think it is?
Are you asking what the current city of Des Moines
Right.
requirement is on
Yeah,
Ingersoll?
yeah.
I'm not sure.
Okay, well, what is it in Johnston?
In Johnston, it's, if you're not in a mixed use district, it's a formula that's similar to what was provided up here, where you look at the square footage of patron area and require a certain amount of parking stalls based off of that. So you're trying to hypothesize how many people are going to sit in there and require a certain amount of parking. And then you also calculate the number of average staff that would be working there.
So why don't we just do that?
You certainly can.
Yeah, why don't we just do that then? That, Susan?
Sounds great.
I think one thing that complicates it is that we've got so much that's already under current use that it's like, I think we're going to constantly be changing the rules and having to come back and approve no matter what we set it at, in order to develop or redevelop any space. But what you propose sounds great.
I'm just talking about the bar and the restaurant. That's
Sure.
right.
I think your analogy to the Star Bar is interesting because there's on-street parking there. Plus, a whole parking lot behind that area that's also for some retail centers.
Yeah, there's a lot of combination parking lots
Yeah.
behind those buildings and they all collectively share that parking. So that's kind of a complicated circumstance back there.
All right.
Not that I go to the Star Bar that often.
So I mean, what you have for average, what you have for restaurants currently, I mean, is fairly similar to what you just said. It goes on more of a person it goes on person capacity and then dining space to some degree.
Okay.
So what I heard was leave it as is then was your suggestion?
Or 300 feet.
Or we could lower the square footage.
I'm hearing meet in the middle of a little more parking than what's currently proposed, a little
Okay.
less than what was previously in there. And I'd also ask, I guess, out of the interest of time, I know Treese was particularly interested in discussing signage. Was anybody else interested in discussing signage?
Well, is it not the last thing?
Should we?
It is
wait?
not, is my
Oh.
example of Aldi is the last thing.
Oh, we don't need any examples. It's already built. Okay, that's signage, example of application of new requirements and then all day. All right, well, we can wait until Ms. Harms joins us, so that takes care of the majority of the list. And then we can discuss the remainder later. Is that acceptable, council?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
We make these changes,
Mhm.
what's our steps?
Well, I would say for the things that we discussed, they need to go back to P and Z, right? And then,
I just didn't know the parking thing if we had, so if we're happy just being in the middle, you're good with that or not?
well, I assume that AJ will probably send it, out to council and ask for feedback and P and Z, et cetera, before bringing it back to council again. Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
5E, consideration of purchase of a case 521G and loader.
Thanks, guys. Taking up time. Got everybody wore down now. This is an automatic yes. Nah, just kidding.
Do you knock on wood?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council, for taking the time this evening to once again look at this issue of our John Deere end loader. The Public Works Department has had $150,000 budgeted for this for the last 2 years. Our end loader was purchased in the year 1999, and we received it in the year 2000. So it has had roughly 24, it's almost 24 years old. I really think that, we need to move forward and replace this piece of equipment because we've already spent $20,000 in 2021 as the Public Works Committee went through and not to exceed $20,000. Now, I understand that the end loader only has 3,000 hours, and which are very minimal hours for a piece of heavy equipment. In hindsight, it sees a lot of heavy lifting, gets abused a lot, lifting the salt, getting all the salt debris on it, not causing rust or causing rust to it. When we had our Public Works Committee meeting roughly month and a half, 2 months ago, we had the guy from Murphy Tractor come out and he took an extensive look at some of the things that were wrong with the end loader. We're starting to get to the point now where the transmission is getting ready to go out. We need to have the front axles rebuilt. And that's going to cost some significant dollars here. As it's broken down in here, we're looking anywhere from $42,000 to $62,000 on some of these repairs. And really, to be honest with you, the piece of machinery is worth, about $40,000, and that's what they're going to give us for trade. You know, John Deere only makes parts for an extended amount of time. So, you know, 15, 20 years is as long as they make parts. So they are going to get to the point where they're going to have refurbished parts. And that's not saying that refurbished parts are a bad thing, but it's just going to be a lot harder to get those parts. Other things that we have to once consider, you know, I've sent out email to everybody here on council of the maintenance plan moving forward, which Andy has built a very extensive maintenance plan for the Public Works Department. And, you know, I just kind of feel that everything has been neglected at that shop for the last 20 years. So I just really feel like, you know, the blame is, you know, kind of on us. But I can guarantee you one thing. I will not let anything happen to this piece of equipment. If this is passed, I will take ownership in it to the nth degree and beyond. You know, I don't even know what else to really say.
Well, let me ask you this, Jason. I was only partially present for the last Public Works meeting. I discussed the sidewalks program before having to go to the MPO meeting. What was the end result or recommendation of the committee? Susan, you were there, right? How did it end up?
To move forward and provide quotes or bids.
Okay.
In which we have gotten the 3 bids from 3 of the major industry leaders with, you know, John Deere, Case, and Caterpillar.
And I think probably a discussion, you know, those years ago was, sure, this needed a lot of work, but a lot of the work was kind of considered what we might call non-essential. But now you are saying that the work that is becoming essential is $42,000 to $62,000.
Right, correct.
So at even the bottom end of that number, the repair is worth more than the machine itself for trade-in anyway.
Correct.
Okay.
You know, the end loader is used for, you know, obviously more than just using salt. And like I say, it's not getting used on a daily basis every single day. But when it is getting used, it's getting used to all of its capabilities. You know, just like Duratio, when we had Duratio, that's probably the most that end loader had probably seen in some time, obviously. And, you know, it give it a good workout. You know, what happens if the firemen, police officers are out in an emergency and they happen to, you know, slide off into a ditch? We don't have ditches around here, but you know, if they're out on the trail and they go down into the trail.
Great Creek.
Yep, you know, we can hook chain on, you know, we can help pull them out. You know, we're gonna have to even call in a tow truck potentially. The other aspects that we have to stop and think about too with this is that if it goes into the shop, a repair shop, and it is getting repaired, it could be 2-3 months. Yeah, yes, we can rent end loaders. That's going to cost anywhere about $3,800 a week, or roughly $6,000 a month, which that could get very spendy very quick. And it depends on what time of year that you could potentially be renting this. If it's in the middle of the winter, everybody and their brother is going to be renting an end loader to clear off their business, their driveways.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Is it appropriate to move a motion to purchase?
Well,
and then we can discuss?
Well, you have to make a motion on which one you think you should discuss, or I'm sorry, purchase.
I'd be happy to do that. I'd move that we move forward with the purchase of the Case 521G wheel loader with regard to the numbers that have been provided City Council.
there a second?
I have a question about the vendors. We've had previously maintenance work done by Urbandale at their new maintenance facility on Hickman. Do we know any preference or skill set on what brands that they work on?
Are you talking about what type of end loaders that facility uses?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna use a variety. I mean, they have Case over there, they have John Deere, they have Caterpillar.
they have all three, okay.
I mean, same with like the city of Des Moines.
To
like
clarify, the last time round, it was said to us that we should purchase John Deere because that would be something that Urbandale would be able to fix for us mechanically. Is that where your
Yeah, because
question comes
they
from?
do a lot of
Yes.
the maintenance, or at one point they were doing a lot of
Yes.
maintenance. Is there any brand preference from there? Yes.
So I think that they have, I think from the gentleman that was
Yeah.
joined us,
John Deere, yep.
that he said that they had a variety. They had just bought a new John Deere, but I think they also have Case as an end loader. So I don't think that it really matters which one. And honestly, if
Okay.
we are under warranty, I would rather go to the place that has warranty. It's
Yeah.
just once we get out of warranty that, well, where are we going to take it to be fixed if it needs to be fixed?
Right, and I mean, if you look down through here on all three of these, you know, honestly, you've got the John Deere here they're gonna give us the longest warranty. And yes, it is the most expensive, but that is a 5-year warranty, where everybody else is gonna give us a 3-year warranty. So, I mean, those are some things that you also have to consider. Obviously, you're gonna probably pay a little bit more to get a two-year more warranty, but to the extent of the use that we use, do we go with a 3 or do we go with a 5? Hindsight with John Deere, I actually spoke with Wyatt today, and he actually told me that they could actually have an end loader by the end of next week. And all John Deere products are built in the state of Iowa in Davenport. So that's another kind of factor to it.
I do just, I know Teresa isn't here, but I will do my little Teresa claim. Just so you know, that we as a Public Works Committee did not discuss this. So it's not like as a Public Works Committee, I can say that this is what we decided. In fact, the information that we received about the end loader needing repair, that was provided to us at the meeting itself. So we attempted to read that as the meeting was going on. So that's not on Jason's fault. That information was provided by him ahead of time. It just didn't filter down to the committee
Gotcha.
in time. So
So the question then is, do we spend an additional $50,000 for a 2-year warranty? And
Well, Michael, nothing runs like a deer. You can't
Yeah, nothing runs like a deer.
Just a
And
tad-
it's
you can't
made in the
just
state of
say-
Iowa.
I think
No.
it's 45,000. The third option to the Caterpillar option is a little bit closer to the Case product. So I guess this might be a question for Susan, because Susan, I know that you researched our equipment during a previous conversation last year. Was there any preference from Urbandale or other maintenance places that between the Case and the Caterpillar?
So that was not provided to us at the
Okay.
last event. And since this was provided to us on Friday,
Yeah.
Fall Festival.
Yep. No, I totally
not
get it.
research. So there wasn't any research. And of course, since it wasn't provided to Public Works, the committee, we weren't able, the gentlemen that like to do this weren't able to research it either. So to answer your question, I have no idea.
Thank you.
So the last, I don't know, 13 times this has been brought up, the concern has been, is there a plan? The word plan is used quite often at this dais. And so the concern was over the maintenance plan for machinery. I believe that has been, every council person now has seen that.
yes,
And now understands that there is an ongoing maintenance plan for all machinery, right? The second thing is again, it's previously discussed, the repairs in question were considered labeled non-essential. Now you're saying the transmission might need rebuilding along with the front axle, and that's in the pack. I don't, where is that in? That's in the full packet? I don't know.
It's in
It's
the
in
letter.
There we go. Okay, it's all the way at the
Right there at the
bottom there.
beginning.
Okay, all right. So now we are talking, again, 40,000, at least $40,000 for. Council, you can send this back to committee for what I believe might be the 5th time.
No.
Or you could acknowledge that there does need to be a purchase of a new end loader. And, you know, the differences between the two are laid out there. And as far as your warranty and, you know, the minor, I don't want to say minor, but there are some differences in horsepower. I don't know how that plays for you guys. But that is, that's the decision before you today.
Mr. Mayor,
Yep.
I'll withdraw my motion, but I want to make a statement. Not too very long ago, we had, and Chief, you know how much I respect the police department. We had a request for new police vehicles. We passed that without a blink and a nod. And we have been struggling with an end loader now for maybe years.
Sure years.
And, you know, I think that we have to trust our people as we trust the chief who says, this is what we need to do our job. We have our trained individuals standing before us saying, we need to do this to do our job. I don't see sending this back to committee again and dragging this thing out. And especially with, we just learned that if there's a John Deere available next week, what are we doing? So I think we move forward.
I'm not willing to move forward with the John Deere. I'll move forward with the case, but I'm not willing to go just for the green color.
Well, if you had stock.
I had stock, I wouldn't be mowing.
Don't you have a John Deere?
I do not.
What is that? Don't you have a riding lawnmower?
I do.
I'd like,
Huh?
could I, is there a motion on the table
No,
currently?
there
Okay.
isn't a motion.
Motion to approve the Caterpillar 920 because of the higher bucket height and same warranty, same delivery window.
My thing is the horsepower.
Uh-oh.
That would be my only,
Mhm.
I would much rather have higher horsepower than 1 foot in height.
I would agree.
I withdraw my motion.
Sorry. I'm just looking at it from what my research did a year ago. That's my
I
only.
drive a Toyota
Otherwise,
Camry that's 4 cylinders. I'm not really tuned into what horsepower can and cannot do.
Well,
Thank you, Susan.
don't check my speeding tickets.
All right.
And you know, the other things that you have to consider, I did not mention this in there. You know, there was questions asked, you know, about like the revolving plan. Well, yes, most other cities and communities around us are obviously our larger communities. They're gonna use them 8 to 12 years. You know, we're gonna probably have this thing for another 15 to 20 years. And you know, the nice thing about any one of these pieces of equipment, like they're literally dialed in to, you know, GPS. So like if there's something that's going on, as soon as we start that tractor over, it goes right to the service desk and they're calling us directly at the shop, say, hey, this is what's going on with this piece of machinery. We're sending a tech out. So that's, I mean, how far in advance technology has come with heavy equipment, tractors, combines, all this.
So I'm going to make a
Different things.
motion to go with the case.
Case I hate.
So
Second.
back to that. Yay,
Second.
I'll second that. Or
No, I
third
already-
it.
I already
All right,
seconded.
fine.
Any further discussion?
No.
Yay.
Roll call.
Yes.
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 Happy day.
Time for reports.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I owe everybody dinner.
That's bribery.
I will submit a written report at next council meeting. Ms. Campbell.
I attended League of Cities. Thank you, Adam Straight, for coordinating everything for us. It was really informative and a great experience. Handed out flyers the past 2 weekends at Hy-Vee. Thank you to Chief Meese, Chief Roth, Jason Roberts, AJ, Nate, and PD and FD members who helped Susan and I hand out flyers. I think I had reminded people. Yes, I did. Got you the time before. And I attended the DART budget meeting as an alternate. The funding, I'll let Joseph keep you guys updated on all the details, but the funding need for permanent sustainable funding is very important and very crucial, and spoke in support of the plan to find alternative funding to not cut services, because that's obviously the first thing that would happen without funding. And we know how important the university corridor is for people getting to work and buy groceries and stuff. So that's it. Thank you.
Libby. We had a positive economic development meeting. Compliments to Sherwood Forest. Colby was there and we talked about a whole slew of things that they hopefully have planned for that area. And all of it would enhance Windsor Heights greatly. We also had an update on Little Brothers and a patio opportunity there. Thanks to AJ for our meeting for an hour this morning. I want to bring up an issue that we dealt with a long time ago, but I think it's just kind of disappeared. Now that we have a fully functioning and fully staffed Chamber of Commerce for Windsor Heights, I'd like to revisit us at some point with regard to welcoming packets for new residents of our community. We talked about this a couple of years ago, even before I was on council. And that was unanimously, I remember Teresa said that she would be happy to knock doors and deliver those. And now that we have a chamber, we could perhaps lean on them to help us fill the swag bag with some things that would be helpful for new residents. I just don't know the process with finding out who those new residents are and whether or not we could find out individuals who rent here. So I'd like to revisit that, Mr. Mayor, at some point in time. Looking forward to Fall Fest this week.
Jones.
The budget workshop for DART, like Lauren said, was helpful for a lot of folks who had not heard about where the deficit's going to sit for us as an entity in the next 5 years. And hopefully that will spark the discussion that we need to have about how we're going to maintain the service level that we want to keep, especially within the corridor, and then what that's going to mean for all the individual communities to be able to kick in depending on how things flow out. So stay tuned for that. That's an ongoing discussion, but at least it's out there now. We have a regular DART meeting tomorrow. That's it.
Thank you. Ms. Garrett.
Everything that Lauren said minus the DART meeting, and the Fall Festival is tomorrow, and I'm hungry. Friday, yeah. Friday and Saturday come out, I'm hungry, and it's past my bedtime.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention the Fall Festival.
You did, didn't you
It's a big
say it
deal.
at the end?
Sure she did.
Oh, yeah.
I'll check the Facebook post.
Thank you.
Adjourn.
Thank you.
I need a motion.
Motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion, first, second, yes.
Third.
Susan
Yes,
Skerrits,
yes.
Joseph Jones. Joseph.
He says yes.
Joseph says yes.
Gave the thumbs up. I saw
Said
him.
yes.
Michael Libby.
Yes.
Lauren Campbell.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a wrap.
At your bedtime, huh?
Since I didn't get to sleep until 2:30 after writing out media.
Separate work session.
Yes, the media thing for all our media
It should have been a
stuff.
work session probably 6 months ago.
I got up at 4:30 this morning, so.
Same.
So-
That's Monday though, right?
Oh, it is only Monday.
Right?
You didn't learn it last week? Last
Mondays.
time?
Mondays are 4:30.
Are you a slow learning?
He learned tonight, so.
I did get a.
Sorry to
No, I do like some.
I like the conversation. I should have, I
Yeah, it was my issue with it.